Jorg wants to get on up. This should be interesting. Begin. Okay. All right. Hope everyone's having a lovely Thursday wherever you happen to be. We had a fantastic gathering about 6 hours ago. And this should be no different. There's a whole bunch of news happening, a whole bunch of crazy stuff happening.
Did you see that crazy? So it turns out that the MacBooks were supposed to be revealed at WWDC.
What happened?
It turns out that the MacBook, the 14 and 16 inch, they were supposed to be revealed at WWDC.
I saw there was
Apple pulled out.
It was revealed that there is a M1X processor.
So the M1X MacBooks were on Apple accidentally. Whoever was doing the updates on their official YouTube stream, they forgot to remove the M1X and the M1X MacBook 14 and 16 inch tags out of the tag when they launched the official video. And the guy who designed the entire show, he had tweeted that it was the biggest show of his life on Friday. And then right before the show started, something like 4 hours before the show started, he deleted the tweet. And so, wow. There were a couple of clues pointing at the fact that those MacBooks were supposed to be there, but Apple ended up pulling out at the last minute on the reveal.
Well, you know what's interesting is they said it was going to be a 2-hour show, right? The keynote. And it turns out It was an hour and 45 minutes.
Yeah.
I thought that
they definitely pulled out on it. I'm still trying to figure out why, though.
Boom. Thank you, Mr. Brown. That was our friend here in Clubhouse named James Brown. He's a guy from Augusta, Georgia. He's
like a sex machine.
He's
Michael, that should be the theme song for your AR/VR love room.
A self-described described sex machine. Oh my goodness.
This room.
Yeah, Augusta, Georgia. Where I've actually been on tour. And when you go on tour around the U.S. with your band and you get to Augusta, Georgia, if you know anything about music, then you know that's the home of one James Brown. And that's holy ground, that part of the world over there. And you can actually go to the church where he grew up singing in the choir and everything. It's quite a music historical thing, you know? So it's part of the fun of touring, actually, with the band and getting to see all these, Sun Studios and all of these historical, super significant little corners of America. Anyway, my brain goes into all kinds of directions when I listen to James Brown. But happy Thursday, wherever you happen to be. Well, let's get into it, and then we'll wait 30 minutes for the room to double in size before we do the official welcome for all those tardy people who are just figuring it out, just wandering through the halls of Clubhouse, trying to figure out where the good stuff is. They'll get here, and when they get here, we will welcome them. And in the meantime, let's jump into some of the biggest headlines in tech at the moment. And the biggest one in terms of the amount of press coverage today at this moment is the JBS meatpacking fiasco. The meat supplier's U.S. chief says that the firm paid cyber criminals in Bitcoin to avoid more disruptions, not to stop the processes, not to stop the meat production. They got the processes back online. They paid them $11 million to stop them from further attacks. So it's that does beg the question, was this actually another FBI kind of plan because it seems really strange to be paying money after you got your shit back online. And I assume this is in cahoots with the FBI and the CIA, and they want to track where the money's going. And really, it's critically important that they figure out the source of all of this kooky hacking nonsense. And the only way to really do that is to pay them the money and follow the money. So it'll be very interesting to see how that shakes out. And I'm predicting now there will be more to come in days to come, just like there was with the Colonial Pipeline. There was much more than met the eye on that one. And
Tyler, there are hundreds of stories you don't hear. I mean,
oh
these are
yeah,
high visibility, high
absolutely.
profile targets, but ransomware is a daily scourge
Oh,
on
totally.
small businesses everywhere, right?
Individuals. I mean, people are getting hit with ransomware all the damn time. You're right. I mean, yeah, to the tune of 1,000 per day, something in that neighborhood. It's just the ones that are critical infrastructure that, like the biggest meat packing, processing company, the big oil pipeline thing, the medical care systems. It's only the really high profile things that get people's attention. But you're right. And it's been this way for quite a while. But the more concerning thing is the sort of escalation in both of the targets and the scope and scale of the ransoms, and how this is all shaking out, and how this will all end up in a year or two or three or four or five from now is of interest for sure. So other really, really the biggest headlines at the moment, not necessarily the most interesting, to be honest with you, but they are the biggest, which is Microsoft says it will soon launch a dedicated device, a new piece of hardware for game streaming, and is working with TV manufacturers to expand their Xbox Game Pass subscription to smart TVs. So good news for all the gamers out there. And then there's a quite an interesting story about a little founder of a little startup called Fan House, not Clubhouse, Fan House. And Fan House is very similar to Patreon, which is a website that makes it easy for people to collect payments from their fans. That's why it's called Fan House. And Patreon has exploded. A lot of content creators use Patreon to offer exclusive content to their biggest fans who want to get more personal and get more privileges and access additional exclusive content. And Fan House is doing the same. The key difference, however, and the reason that Fan House is a key topic of tech conversations at the moment, is because Fan House is very angry at Apple, because Apple is clashing with the platform over whether Apple gets to take a cut of the payments from the fans to the creators at 30%, because it's Apple's policies that Apple gets a 30% cut of all of the what they call in-app purchases. So if a fan makes a payment, an in-app payment to a creator, Apple's saying, well, according to our rules, we get 30% of that. And Fan House says that's bullshit. The creator should get that money. Fan House only takes a 10% cut. Fan House is claiming Apple should get 30% of Fan House's 10% cut. And Apple says,
Tyler?
yes?
Sorry to interrupt. I was in the middle of press. Can we just retract for a second for the JBS headline?
Sure.
I want to try and break that up with you.
Okay.
So, as far as I understand, there was an initial payment made. The first payment made was for $5 million US. The first payment was for $5 million US. So let me tell you my version of it, and then you tell me where I'm wrong.
Okay.
And let's try and unpack this.
Okay.
So the first payment was for $5 million US. That was the original headline. And at that point, from what I know, JBS, headquarters are in Australia.
Yeah, they're an Australian company. Yeah.
Right. So they're one of the largest suppliers of meat for the entire world. However, 50 to 60% of their exports from Australia go to North America,
Right.
which includes Canada
Yep.
and the United States.
Yes.
Post that $5 million US ransom being paid, and it was not revealed which form it was paid in. That initial ransom was not revealed as to which form it was paid in. After that came the legislation of a ransomware attack on, I'm forgetting the exact terms of the legislation, but we discussed this. Remember where it specifically said that such an attack would then be considered a terrorist attack.
Sorry,
we got
by the way,
further into the.
they're not Australian
Sorry.
based. Apparently, what I'm reading is they are Brazil based.
I believe if you look up the Bloomberg, I mean, we can get back to that in a second.
Okay.
But however, the important point is then came the legislation. So for the initial $5 million US, we don't have, as far as I know, I don't have an accurate source as to how that was paid, whether it was paid in crypto or however it was paid.
Uh-huh.
But for a pretty long time, the lines and the automation of the plants remained offline, and the labor had to go in and basically operate as if they were back in the 50s and the 60s, which slowed down the meat supply, et cetera, and hit the United States. And then you had that new legislation come in saying that this will now be considered a terrorist attack. Now you've got a new headline coming out, which came out today or yesterday or whenever it did, which is a $11 million US ransom being paid, which to me sounds like this is another ransom that has been paid and maybe bait in terms of the FBI being involved and paying it vis-a-vis Bitcoin to try and track it. And the original one that had been paid was paid to the hackers that had claimed that they were Russian. And now that this has been, so what I'm trying to get down to here is, are there two different ransoms? And if there are two different ransoms, then the total ransom is at 16 million US. And if there are two different ransoms, then one was paid after it was declared a terrorist attack. And if that one was paid after it was declared a terrorist attack, then doesn't that go against the entire framework of the legislation, which is we do not deal with terrorists in the United States?
Yeah.
And how does...
I'll read it to you.
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm not seeing, and I've read about now 5 different versions from 5 different outlets, and none of them mention a $5 million payment. All of them mention that it's a Brazilian parent company and that it's the U.S. arm that dealt with the attack, basically. But let me just pick one of these.
Is this the one from Guardian, most recent one? It says world's biggest meat producer, JBS, paid 11 million cyber crime ransom. The Brazilian-based giant paid ransom in Bitcoin after ransomware attack shut down operations across the world. So it's 11 million by Bitcoin.
Right, but then it also, here's the one I have right here from the Wall Street Journal. JBS USA Holdings, which is the U.S. arm of the Brazilian meat company, paid 11 million ransom to cyber criminals who last week temporarily knocked out plants that process roughly 1/5 of the nation's meat supply, the company's chief executive said. The ransom payment in Bitcoin was made to shield JBS meat plants from further disruption and to limit potential impact on restaurants, grocery stores, and farmers that rely on JBS, said Andre Nogueira, chief executive of Brazilian meat company JBS SA's USA division. Here's the quote. "It was very painful to pay the criminals, but we did the right thing for our customers," Mr. Nogueira said Wednesday in an interview with the Wall Street Journal. Again, this is yesterday. He added that the payment was made after the majority of JBS plants were up and running again. That's why I said, isn't it interesting that the plant was up and running again, but they still made the payment, because I think they're trying to honey trap them. JBS, it says, is the world's largest meat company by sales, processing beef, poultry, and pork from Australia to South America and Europe. In the U.S., the company is the biggest beef producer and top supplier of chicken and pork. Its subsidiaries, also hit by the attack, is the second largest U.S. poultry producer after Tyson Foods. The attack on JBS was part of a wave of incursions using ransomware in which companies are hit with demands for multi-million-dollar payments to regain control of their operating systems. The operator of the pipeline bringing gas line to parts of the East Coast in May paid about $4.4 million to regain control of its operations and restore service. The attacks show how hackers have shifted from targeting blah, blah, blah. Mr. Nogueira said JBS learned of the attacks early on May 30th when technology staff members noticed irregularities with the functioning of some servers. Soon they found a message demanding a ransom to reclaim access to the company's system. Mr. Nogueira, who was traveling, said he was awakened around 5 a.m. by a phone call from his chief financial officer notifying him of the incursion. Now, here's where it gets interesting, and to answer your point that you raised, Ross, JBS immediately alerted the FBI.
Can I just say one thing, Tyler, quickly? So I read another article. You're correct. So the headquarters are in Brazil.
Yeah.
However, there's other plants in Australia.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
But it clearly said, okay, so the amount might not be 5 million, but they made some payment to get the plants online.
Yeah,
And
no,
then
please
another
please
payment was
forward
made
that
for
to me
11
because
million.
none of the ones I have read have mentioned anything about that. But here's the
Yeah,
part that I
so
want. Here's the interesting part of the article. JBS immediately alerted the FBI, Mr. Nagura said, and the company's technology team began shutting down the meat's supplier systems to slow the attack's advance. JBS called in technology vendors that had previously worked with the company, and when the cybersecurity expert and consultants who began negotiating with the attackers. Here's the key part. The FBI last week attributed the JBS attack to a company called Revil, a criminal ransomware gang. Mr. Nagura said the JBS and outside firms are conducting forensic analysis of its information technology systems and that it's yet clear how the attackers accessed, and JBS maintains secondary backups. We didn't think we could take this type of risk with something could go wrong in our recovery process, because again, they were recovering already before they paid the money. It was insurance to protect our customers, meaning they couldn't risk the recovery from going down because they were worried about their customers. Now, here's the part about the FBI that's really interesting. He says that JBS's outside advisors negotiated the payment, and then the FBI officially discourages companies hit by ransomware attacks from paying hackers. Not that it's illegal, just that they discourage it, arguing that doing so supports a booming criminal industry and that often the decryption tools given in exchange for ransom don't work. But senior officials in the Biden administration have said in recent weeks that they recognize the decision is tough for companies and have generally avoided condemning the practice of paying these ransomwares. Again, it's not illegal. It's not, they can do it. They just would really prefer that you not do it. And then here's the quote. The FBI never recommended that we not pay, Mr. Blount said, describing conversations that took place after the hack was discovered, but while the pipeline was still offline. Mr. Blount said the companies ultimately relied on the backups to restore its systems, but said that not paying could have slowed down the recovery process. Again, wouldn't have kept it off. It just would have made it slower to recover. Think about what it would be like if we didn't bring the pipeline back until the blah, blah, blah. But, so Joseph Blount, by the way, is the CEO of the Colonial Pipeline. And so they add in his quotes that the FBI never recommended not paying. So that the FBI is all in favor of them paying. Is that not? They would prefer you didn't, but they're not going to tell you not to. And so it's far from illegal to pay them. The question is that in the future going to be a new policy that's going to be very carefully worded policy crafting to, not penalize people for paying their way back into business. That's going to be a very difficult bill to.
And I think the more difficult question too, Tyler, is now that this is terrorism as officially designated by the government, will the NSA and CIA get involved? Will we have retaliatory strikes? Will we have drone strikes against some,
that's where
location
I'm getting
somewhere?
at.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I guess essentially they could start using, if they do find out who these people are, might they, use drones like they do traditional quote unquote terrorists. Yeah. It's a very interesting point. To be seen. Because that
Okay,
by the way, that
I'll
could
send you the article offline, Tyler.
sure. But to that point about drone strikes on terrorists, if they're classified as terrorists, and then where they, their residence is accurately determined and verified, and then they drop bombs on their house, that might be a deterrent from people doing these ransomware attacks.
Man, the
So
scarier
if
than the
it's a
bombs are
state,
the kinetic weapons, man. The rods from God or whatever. That's really
no,
scary.
no. So since the legislation, I imagine, is already in place, and if it's considered a terrorist attack, if it's state actors, then it will. I would believe it would be an act of war, and
It doesn't need
we'd
to be
have.
state actors necessarily, because some of the Middle East terrorists weren't associated with any state, unless you consider what was the caliphate's name, the black and white flag.
Taliban, Afghanistan.
No,
They hit
Well,
Afghanistan because of
ISIS.
the Taliban,
ISIS.
right?
I'm referring to the
No,
ISIS
but
caliphate, where it's not really a state, but they were bombed as terrorists.
Yeah, the state
that's true.
actors always distance themselves somewhat from the actual states that sponsor them. So there's always like one or two steps away from state funding or state actors. So I'd say watch this space.
Yeah, it's going to be it's not over yet. I mean, it could be still early innings. This could go on for many months, and it'll be what happens next. I think it's something like that. I think it's something like somebody gets bombed somewhere in Western Russia, in some
But
little
what's
town.
clear is that the ability of technology and hacking can clearly take entire economies offline,
Yep.
starve
Yep.
economies, deprive economies of commodities, and can lead to future warfare.
Yeah.
That's essentially the conclusion of this discussion.
And
It's
this is
interesting that countries like Israel don't get ransomware attacks publicly. I wonder if Mossad is doing a lot of behind-the-scenes assassinations of various Arab players who are trying to do cyber attacks.
But you can ask that question to someone who will probably appear on Justin's show in a couple of weeks at some point.
Good point.
Yeah, you bring up a really fascinating point. Is where else in the world are these major infrastructure attacks, ransoms happening? Exactly. And yeah, that's a really interesting point. So moving on, I'm just going through the very top big ones, and here's the fourth biggest article in terms of not the most interesting, but the most coverage by mainstream press. It from the New York Times and others, The Verge and Engadget, saying that Google has a really interesting update to their algorithm, where Google plans to change its search algorithm to prevent sites that extort people like you to remove slanderous content from appearing in search results for people's names. And to unpack that and make it simpler to digest, what they're referring to is there are, if you've ever had anything negative written about you online, and a good percentage of people have, and then you do a Google search and you see something about you that you don't like, there are companies that are promoting themselves. Hey, Cheryl. Hey, JT. Hey, Nalormi. Hey, Dave. We can remove that for you. Click here. Give us your credit card. That's what we do. We remove negative content. And it's become this crazy industry of cat and mouse, where oftentimes these sites actually, before you're a customer, actually want lots of negative stuff about you on the internet. And in fact, there's a site called mugshots.com where they intentionally put every mugshot from every police department, which technically are public photos, online with your name, so that when you Google yourself, you see your mugshot. And of course, they will remove it for a very small price of about $1,500. So Google is now updating its algorithm to hide these fucksticks, so that they can't really softly extort you for your hard-earned money, because it's a really shitty thing to do. And
is that a technical term, Tyler?
Yeah, that's
it is an extremely technical,
very
term.
technical. If you went to Cambridge, if you went through the hardcore Stanford PhD in computer science, then you know what fucksticks means. It's it's a very technical term. So that's what Google's doing, and I just got to say, every once in a while, these big companies do something fantastic, and when they do, we applaud them, and kudos Google for that update. I kind of like it. And as the Verge headline says, Google is fighting back against exploitive, slanderous, shitbag websites. Actually, that second to last word I added myself. And Engadget says,
okay,
Google will
update
its search algorithm to discourage slander, extortion schemes from fuckbags. So, and again, I might have added that last word, but so the fifth biggest.
That's what Amanda calls me offline.
Yeah.
There's a lot of new faces in the audience. Have you explained the benefits of the room and the acronym, Tyler?
Yeah. So
yeah,
we'll get there. Welcome everybody to Tech News Around the World. This is you have found your dysfunctional home for tech news addicts on the internet. Welcome everybody. Where have you been? You have found your people. You have found your tribe. We are here every day, twice a day, and it's called.
We're here all day.
We've been waiting for you. Thank you.
We have nothing else to do.
We're glad you finally arrived. Where have you been? So here's how it works, everybody. We meet now twice a day, every day. You click on the title of the room to see the schedule. And we also have deep dive rooms that follow this Tech News Around the World room. And you can see those by clicking on the title and scrolling through the upcoming events. And more importantly, do you want to be beautiful? Do you want to be handsome? Maybe a few inches or centimeters taller? Maybe lose a few pounds or kilograms? Well, boy, are you in the right place. Welcome to Tech News Around the World. Simply click on the title of the room and follow the Tech News Club, and you too can have the incredible, gorgeous complexion of Rhonda next to me here on stage. Rhonda.
My hair came back. I grew hair.
Yeah.
And it will boost your credit score instantly.
Yeah. Some people have different outcomes. In Michael's case, it raised his credit score. Personally, it raised my IQ from about a 50 to about 125. Although there are
results may vary.
Yeah, your results may vary. There are, by the way, no guarantees and no money back. But today only, this is absolutely free. You can follow the Tech News Club for the very, very, very low price of just $0.00. And you can pay that in Bitcoin if you like. That's up to you. But Cheryl, can you show the before and after? Can you do a PTR?
Okay, let me do it.
Because there are possible side effects, as we say. And we say this in the sake of full transparency. We want you to know, even though you will find the love of your life, you will be happier, more successful. All those things are very true. But indeed, there are possible side effects. And you can see, in the sake of transparency, if you click on Cheryl's photo and refresh your screen by pulling down, you will see that was me just 2 days ago. But I missed 2 episodes of Tech News Around the World and my hair fell out. So don't let that...
Amanda and I have birthed 2 children in the past 3 months.
Don't let this happen to you. Make sure you come every day. Because you don't want to be like Ben and myself, and heaven forbid it should happen to anyone else. It's already happening to Froz. He missed a day.
Yes.
Anyways, it's a lot of fun. We're glad that you're here, and we cover the tech news from around the world. And it's a very unique format. Everyone in the room is welcome on stage. Sylvan's got his hand up. Let's get him and Harry up here. And we want, if you happen to have a headline from your part of the world, geographically or professionally, more remote and diverse, the better, honestly, because that's where all the interesting news is happening. And I'm just going now at the top of the hour through all of the big headlines in the mainstream media. And now we're going to get into the fun stuff and get into headlines from all over the world in fintech, medtech, crypto land, and everything in between. So I'll pause here to see if anyone on stage has a headline from their part of the world to share.
I have one which is non-political, non-controversial around the mega round that Klarna has just announced.
My friends, yeah.
So, just after raising 3 months ago, around, they are announcing today that they've raised another $639 million at a post-money valuation of 45-ish billion, which is a 330% increase over its $10 billion valuation. Okay. But more importantly, the last round was just raised a few months ago. And you might recall that SoftBank is already invested and is also following on into this round. And you have plenty of others. And I have already tweeted that out. Klarna, as a very quick reminder, operates in 20 countries and has 90 million global active users. And they are going to use this money to acquire more talents in order to continue their global expansion. They are still denying they're going for an IPO, but the CEO is softly saying that they're already operating as if they were a listed company, but he's not saying that they are preparing for an IPO. I think that's it. Non-political, non-controversial.
Yeah. So we did cover this briefly. Klarna, just for those who don't know, it's from my hometown there of Stockholm. Klarna, by the way, is the first partner in my events that I do in Sweden. And if it wasn't for Klarna, I wouldn't have spent the last 8 years in Sweden. And Sebastian, the CEO, knows that. and I can't. As I have told him many times, I am forever in debt, and grateful and loyal to him and to Klarna. And when their competitor, by the way, wanted to sponsor my events, I, rather than accept it, and it was incredibly generous sponsorship, I said, hold that thought. Let me go ask Sebastian first, because out of my endless respect and gratitude to Sebastian and Klarna, I said, Sebastian, your competitor wants to sponsor my event, and I'm, rather than just say yes, you tell me, should I take it or not? I leave it in your hands. And he said, take it. So they're a good company, and why not? I said, okay, I will, but I wanted to check with you first, because I wouldn't be doing these events if it wasn't for you. So just to give you a little taste of, how much respect I have for Sebastian and for Klarna. They're a fantastic company, and I couldn't.
Yeah, he's important to you, Tyler, and I'd never heard anything about him personally until I read that Sunday Times article when him as a parent was commented on.
Mm-hmm.
The guy in the shop just saying, you're someone who pays attention to your son and your phone's in your pocket. So that's the only thing that I knew about him. But since I've heard you talk about him, I've got big respect for him.
So here's a really inspirational story for everybody that has really never been told. So Klarna was really three co-founders at the beginning. Nicholas and Frederick and Sebastian and Victor, rather. Nicholas and Victor and Sebastian. And when they pitched it right after leaving university, and they did it at a pitch competition, and they didn't win. In fact, that the judge just thought it sucked, honestly. And what the pitch was is now the hottest thing in the world, and everyone's trying to duplicate it all around the planet at the moment, which I'll reveal in a moment. And there was one lady in the audience named Jane Wallerand, who's a bit of a genius herself, and she saw this pitch and said, "Take my money." And she was the first investor in Klarna. And you can imagine now that Klarna is worth $45 billion. Jane didn't do too bad on that deal, if you know what I'm saying.
Looks like the golden age of venture capital is dead.
Chris.
So Jane is fantastic. And the guys were lucky to get Jane as an investor. And what Klarna pitched that day, that has now turned into one of the most copied startups on the planet, is the ability for people to buy things without paying for it or paying later for it. And to do that, they calculate your risk assessment to offer, to pay for the items on your behalf. And then, of course, you pay later with a little bit of interest, or in some cases, no interest. It really depends on your creditworthiness. And they've now grown this into a juggernaut, $45 billion juggernaut. It's almost going to pass Spotify soon if they keep growing at this rate, which is also from Stockholm, by the way. And you're right. They in the past 12 months or so, they've gone from a $30 billion valuation until just a month ago, it was a $40 billion valuation. Now it's a $45.6 billion valuation. They just grew like $5 billion in the last month in valuation, which is tremendous. A $5 billion company is tremendous, and they just grew in $5 billion of value in the last month or so. But it's because they're going international. And here's why it's growing. The valuation's growing so ridiculously quickly. It's because they are the pioneer and the best in the biz at doing what they do. They've been doing it longer than anybody, and they need to grow internationally as fast as fucking possible, because it's a race on every continent. On the US, they've been copied by Max from formerly of PayPal. Max Levchin of PayPal heard what Klarna is doing and said, I used to run PayPal, I can copy that. And he did, and he calls it a firm, and he did an IPO in the US. And so there's a race in the US to capture the US market. There's a race now down in Indonesia to capture Indonesia. There's a race in India. There's a race every corner of the world. And so Klarna needs to raise a lot of money to grow as fast as possible and compete in these races for these markets around the planet. So now you understand what's really going on here, why their valuation is going up so quickly, and why they're raising so much money so quickly. And as much as they were planning to IPO, which I know a little too much, as much as they were hoping and planning to IPO, not really hoping, planning to IPO, and they still are, In fact, they were planning to go on the London Exchange, and now due to the red tape, they're going to IPO in the US. But you didn't hear that from me, anybody. But anyway, so their plans to IPO is actually being pushed aside because the priority is grow fast, raise money fast, to grow fast, to raise money fast, go, 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 go. And the truth is, doing the IPO slows things down. There ain't no time to IPO when you're growing this fast. That's a great problem to have. It's one of the best problems you could ever have. So I couldn't
Hey,
be.
Tyler.
Yes, one final
Oh, I
thought
was
here.
sorry.
We had a headline 24 hours ago that my buddy Peter from Northvolt also just raised $2.75 billion for his startup called Northvolt. So the combination of Northvolt's fundraising 24 hours ago of $2.75 billion and this $0.64 billion combined is about $3.4 billion of fundraising for Stockholm startups in the past 24 hours. That makes the Stockholm math incredibly exciting for 2021. This is already a record-breaking year, and we are only in June. So,
could I add another unicorn to that list?
Go for it.
The Ledger wallet out of France.
Oh yeah,
just got their
another
Series C, 380 million.
Another dearest friend of mine, Ian Rogers.
I'm not surprised.
Yes, who last Christmas, him and his girlfriend and his girlfriend's daughter spent their entire Christmas and New Year's here at my house. And he left as the CTO, Chief Digital Officer of LVMH to join Ledger. And Ledger just joined the Unicorn Club, and I couldn't be happier. And he and I.
Are you still in Florida?
No, I'm back in Amsterdam. Hi, Michael.
Hey, boo boo.
But Ledger, which is a hardware wallet system, is I think very lucky to have Ian Rogers on the team. And Ian, by the way, was just in Clubhouse last night. And he's been doing a weekly little series here. So next time he's in here, if you follow me, I'll be in there. And if anyone, you want to say hi to Ian, matter of fact, let me try and see. I'm going to try. Cool. He's now following me in Clubhouse. So let me try and ping him in here.
Try and ping him in here. Yeah.
I will right now. Here he is, Ian Rogers.
Awesome.
Boom.
Yay.
Nice.
Click, ping, ping. Boom. Sent.
Click, ping,
so
ping.
keep an eye out for somebody named Ian Rogers joining the room, and let me know if he enters the room so we can jump him on stage and just congratulate him for this headline. So yeah, keep an eye out for that. And thank you, Sarah, for the headline about my friends at Klarna. Again, couldn't be happier for them and for the Stockholm tech ecosystem now that both Peter and Sebastian have these monster fundraising rounds. Is just, Stockholm's a city of 1 million people, and we're raising just insane amounts of money for the startups there. We're just, holy cow, it's incredible. Anyway, we did cover the fan house battle with Apple, and the founder, Jasmine, did a tweet, and her tweet starts off with hashtag fuck Apple is the first the first word of her tweet is hashtag fuck Apple. So you're going to want to read this one. I'm retweeting it right now from the Tech News Twitter account, where she says, I co-founded Fan House app 8 months ago to empower creators to monetize their content. We pay creators 90% of their earnings, only keeping 10%. Now Apple is threatening to remove our app Fan House from the App Store unless we give Apple 30% of the creator's earnings. This is theft and exploitation, she says. And she has an interesting point, because her main competitor, which is Patreon, somehow magically has an exemption where they don't have to pay Apple this 30% that Patreon creators earn from their fans. So that's a little bit of favoritism or nepotism on some capacity, and it might be because Jasmine doesn't really have high profile investors like Patreon has, and those investors may or may not have kind of personal relationships with people high up at Apple. And so, hey, tech journalists, there's a story for you. Why don't you go do that little investigation and shake that tree and see what shakes loose out of that, huh? Why don't you try that? Give that tree a wiggle and see what shakes out. Maybe a nut might fall out of that tree. That could be a good story for you. So,
actually, Tyler, you mentioned a very good point about that being a great story. So in foreign policy and when you want to take over different countries, it's called slicing the salami. So usually you go after the weakest countries first. You bomb them, invade them, take them over, and then you go after the bigger fish to fry. So it's not like they're not going to go after Patreon. They're just probably going to do it after they deal with Fanhouse because it's the weaker challenger. So you take over one, and then once you consolidate your position, then you go after Patreon. And then the second part is all of Apple's dominance is because the only place you can download an app from is from their own app store. Whereas on Android, you have the option, if you want, to be able to download any type of application from outside of the app store. And I think that's one of the things that the antitrust authorities are definitely going to take a look at, because then that's just going to weaken all the monopoly power of Apple, including the whole payments and that whole ecosystem.
Thank you for that,
Yeah,
Sal.
there are so many.
Go ahead.
There are so many creators now, and so many apps that help monetize the work of creators. I can think of Fanbase, you know, and a whole bunch of others, Cameo, and Apple. If they take 30% of all of those, it doesn't become worth it for the app developer. So this is a business model that's kind of new, and Apple is going to have to figure out how to charge for it in a way that doesn't make it impossible.
Yep. But I got Mr. Faraz on stage is on a roll, just sent in 3 fantastic articles in a row that I just retweeted. I'll read them for you now. And by the way, every article we talk about here in this room, we are tweeting from our Twitter account in real time. So being this is an audio app, you can listen to this. Open up the Twitter account at TNATW, which is short for Tech News Around the World. In fact, it's the first letters of Tech News Around the World, TNATW. And then you can see in real time these articles as we discuss them. And you can also send in articles by simply including our Twitter account as part of your tweet. So tweet out any article, include our Twitter handle, TNATW. We see it, and we can click and retweet it to our ever-growing list of incredibly beautiful, handsome, I dare say even sexy audience of now, I think it's 2,300 followers. And it's growing like a weed, that account. But here are the articles that Faraz just sent in. And this is a humdinger of an article. French and Swiss launch cross-border digital currency trial. Holy cow, y'all. This whole crypto craze is for real. So the central banks of Switzerland and France have joined forces with commercial banks to experiment on a wholesale cross-border digital currency, according to a statement. UBS Group, Credit Suisse, Accenture, and Natixis are among the private sector players involved. The effort was launched under the auspices of an innovation hub at the Bank for International Settlements. The project will look at cross-border settlements of 2 wholesale central bank digital currencies, including the exchange of financial instrument against the euro CBD. And here's the quote. The G20, which are the 20 biggest economies, has made enhancing cross-border payments a priority. According to the BIS Innovation Hub head named Benoit Couillard, was quoted as saying, this experiment contributes to the work by exploring how wholesale central bank digital currencies could enhance speed, efficiency, and transparency in cross-border use cases. Very, very interesting. This is how Europe is embracing what we call CBDCs, central bank digital currencies. Sweden has their own called the digital kroner. And now this very interesting development between France and Switzerland in a cross-border digital currency trial. Although,
So just a quick question, Tyler.
Yes.
For the European friends, what doesn't make sense to me is you've got the European Union, which as a monetary union needs to have the euro. Now, if you're going to have central bank digital currencies coming out from every corner of the European Union in a different fashion, where every 2 countries or 1 country is going to have its own, how is that going to operate? Do we have someone on stage that could possibly comment further a little bit on this? Is there anyone here? Just looking for an opinion. If not, we can just move on to the next one.
Faraz, can you Could you reframe that question? Because I'm in Amsterdam, and I know that there's been a number of
So,
conversations with
may I
the
ask,
EU.
the monetary union is the euro, right?
Correct.
And,
But
and if
actually,
you've
wait
got
a
the
second.
euro,
Wait, for
Not
us,
for Switzerland, not
Switzerland,
for
Switzerland
Switzerland.
is not part of the
Yeah,
monetary
it's
It's a
decision.
yeah.
Swiss
Huh?
for
right?
franc.
So,
us,
In
no,
Switzerland, you have
so
Swiss
right.
francs.
okay, we don't need 30 people saying
Can I
Switzerland's
finish?
not part of the EU.
Just for a sec. Okay,
It's the
sorry, man.
Swiss
I
franc.
was right. So forget Switzerland, but then you've got the krona as well, right? And
Well,
then
actually,
you've got
Nordics are also not part of the EU.
Scandinavia.
I've got the answer to your question, Faraz, if you want.
okay. Thank you very much.
Because
Okay.
Because there's many other countries. Germany has its own that's coming.
yeah,
Well,
Okay,
for
there's a
us,
Okay, can we
before
just let Pierre
yeah,
go
because
for it? Go for
I'm
it.
French and I know I know a few people in the central bank in France. So
Thank you very much.
the reason why they're doing this is that you have lots of people working in France, working in Switzerland and living in France and vice versa. And as you know, the Switzerland is not part of the the euro. So that's simply the reason why they want to experiment with a kind of cross-border currency that would facilitate exchanges for those people who live in France but get paid in Swiss franc because they work in Switzerland.
for us to
So
add to
this
what
is my
Pierre
case, Pierre.
said.
This is my exactly my case. But what is a cross-border digital currency going to do for me when I earn my salary in Swiss francs in my
Can
UBS bank account, and then how do I spend? How am I going to spend this digital currency in France?
At
That's a
some
good
point,
question.
let Ame finish her point. By the way, you guys.
guys, can I may just finish your point? And I apologize for interrupting, Sarah. Since I asked the question,
I
can I just get my answer first?
I
If that's
was
okay with you?
what I was going to
Thank
share
you.
was is Pierre and Sarah have really valid statements. One of the things that Pierre brought up is like one main point is that the European Union, you're going to see the top three powers in the financial ministry because my ex-boyfriend actually was advising the financial ministry to the EU on cryptocurrency about 4 or 5 years ago. And he's actually a hacker himself, and he was speaking a lot of the conferences around the finance ministry here because Holland, Netherlands, Germany, and I believe France, I'm not sure, are the top three people that hold seats in the EU Parliament in terms of monetary and financial ministry, because I worked in Belgium before. To Sarah's point, it's very interesting. To Pierre's, it's very interesting because I'm a consultant, and I'm going to take an example of Accenture working out of Milan or Torino, working on a project for Louis Vuitton or Kering Group, because Switzerland holds the luxury space. But most of those people cannot get access to working in Switzerland. So they're going to work on those projects from Paris and they're going to travel in. The interesting thing that I'm chiming in with Sarah is, how is that going to be navigated? And Cal, you know, because you've worked at Accenture and so have I, how is that going to be navigated when you have Louis Vuitton that's based in, let me use Kering Group. Kering Group is based in Paris. The headquarters are in Paris, but all of their business and their luxury production and stuff is done out in Milan, but it's also on the Swiss side as well. So when you start seeing these luxury companies, there's about 10 luxury houses. I'm quite curious to see how this is going to play out because Sarah's statement's pretty valid. How do you identify that? How do you quantify it? And is it going to be for only certain people? I think the cross borders being tested, probably, in my humble opinion, is because Accenture and IBM GBS and all these consulting firms have major projects
Sure,
at those
sure.
locations.
Sure, may I get that? And Sarah, please allow me one more second, and I would love to hear from you, of course. But see, I understand Switzerland's not a part of the European Union, but there's also rumors going around Germany is going to be coming up with its own central bank digital currency. There's a hope Netherlands is going to be coming up with its own central bank digital currency. Anyone in the space knows this, and I'm sure you've heard it as well.
Yep.
It doesn't necessarily just have to be the case that is being studied on the headline today, right? So if it were to come up, and for example, you have this cross-border thing going on with UBS, Credit Suisse, which are the two largest private banks in the world. You've got UBS, which I think stands at 1.9 trillion US dollars of assets under management, unless that's changed, or maybe 2.1, and you've got Credit Suisse standing at around 1.8 US dollars of 1.8 US dollars trillion US dollars of assets under management. These banks are in multiple locations. Their reserves have to be held in multiple locations. Most of them have to hold in the euro if they're holding in the European Union, which locations they're holding them at. How is this whole thing going to play out, especially if they're Swiss banks sitting with their headquarters in Switzerland, but also holding across the European Union? This is a much wider thing other than just the case of Switzerland and France trying a cross-border thing. My question that I'm trying to make here is that there's a number of major institutions involved there that have been named, and they're trying and piloting a test study of a cross-border digital currency, whereas they pretty much will run the central bank digital currency for the euro as well. And that is a conflict of interest, in my humble opinion. Does the question make more sense now? Does the point
So
make more sense now to
for me,
everyone?
Faraz, it does, but this is also where I'm going to kind of I'm going to channel a bit of Ben down at the bottom. This is why it's going to become a clusterfuck. You know, I mean, at the end of the day, that's going to be an administrative nightmare. And this is what decentralization, and this is the power of decentralization, because the CDBCC is still going to have to be regulated by the country that develops it. But now, how are they going to do business cross-border because of what you just described? And that doesn't make logical sense. That just sounds like a complete
Thank you.
clusterfuck.
Exactly. And that is the reason for the questioning.
Okay.
Unless they
Guys, if I
do,
could give a personal information. Sorry,
Heyman, there
just
was a lady speaking. Hold on.
oh, sorry, I didn't miss that.
that was no lady, that was me.
Okay.
She's a queen. Sorry, queen.
What I was saying, what I was going to say is this sounds a lot like the rally social tokens, only on a nationwide level, where in order to deal with another token, you have to trade through a central token, which is Rally. And why is this different from that? I mean, it isn't.
Dr. Francine,
Yeah,
it's well, when you talk about Rally is a social token, right? So when you look at what the CBDCs, you're absolutely correct. It would make it just more interchanged and it's just going to make more work, because now you're looking at the fact that you're now going to put in another intermediary, because there's going to have to be someone that converts it.
exactly.
And it's going to set a whole craziness in play, because there's so many consultants in these companies and there's so many people working in different countries because they've got visas. I just think it's an administrative nightmare. That's just my opinion.
Okay. Since we've been, I'm sorry, Francine, did you have a follow-up?
No, I said I think the same thing, and that's why I wanted to comment on it.
Cool.
It seems like it's subverting the goal of a digital currency.
By the way, I just a quick shout out to follow Dr. Francine Hardaway and Amay, who were just both speaking, because Dr. Francine Hardaway does one of my absolute favorite rooms, the Karma Club here in Clubhouse, and Amay does fantastic rooms to help people onboard knowledge-wise. It's almost like a boot camp, a free university of sorts for learning all things crypto, kind of starting from the beginning. And particularly for women, of which we know we need a lot more women in the crypto space. And that's why she's doing this fantastic public service here in Clubhouse. And you can see Amay's upcoming rooms and all of our upcoming rooms by clicking on the title of this room and seeing the Tech News Club, which we hope you follow. And you will notice that we have two upcoming rooms right after this one. The first being the Thursday AI News with Ben and Sid from Apple, and Dave and Sahir and Jean-Francois on stage, who has been a pioneer in the space for over a decade. And then simultaneously, there will be another deep dive room, which Michelle on stage, who works at Facebook, is leading, about a kind of a virtual job referral interview tips and ask me anything for people who want to work at Facebook, Apple, Amazon, or Google. And you can see both of those and click the bells on those.
Tyler, one more. Dr. Francine has a Karma Club room in 3 hours' time too.
Yeah. And follow her to get notified about that. And
yes,
you're most welcome. And by the way, nearly everybody on this stage right now has a deep dive room of their own, which you can see by looking at the Tech News Club. And I appreciate every one of them is fantastic, by the way, or they wouldn't be on this stage, honestly. So, I want to run through some headlines here real quick, and then we'll circle back and see what else people have in mind. So the first one
I got a headline.
Yep. As I said, we're going to run through my headlines, and then we're going to run through the stage and see what headlines you might have. So the Wall Street Journal just reported that cryptocurrency comes to retirement plans. as Coinbase teams up with a 401k provider in the US. Workers at participating companies can invest up to 5% of their 401k balances into cryptocurrencies thanks to Coinbase. That's a truly interesting, genius business development move for Coinbase and their partner, whoever that happened to be, the 401k company. But it really starts to spread the use case of how people start to engage with cryptos, and for people who hadn't previously.
Does it talk about the tax implications? Because 401k contributions aren't taxed, so I wonder if that applies to the crypto side
So
as well.
yeah, it wouldn't be until which time you kind of take the capital gains by transferring out of the crypto, no doubt. But for those who want to do the deep dive, I'm tweeting this from the Tech News Twitter account, which is very conveniently the first letters of tech news around the world. TNATW is the Twitter account, and I'm tweeting that out right now, so you can save that article, bookmark that article, and do your own deep dive on that. Another interesting one, Samsung now announcing a new phone that has a 50 million pixel camera, a 50 megapixel sensor. And why is that interesting? Well, because that means they could get much more accurate photos of your beautiful face and can extract data that they previously couldn't extract. And that's why TikTok is now going to do something called face prints, because now the cameras on these devices is getting good enough to extract all kinds of crazy data from your beautiful face. What kind of data am I talking about? Well, give me 2 seconds, my friend. They can tell your gender, your age, whether or not you're homosexual or heterosexual, if you're Republican or Democrat. Yes, from your face. From your face. Your physical health, if you've had a concussion, chronic pains, vision disorders, obesity, Parkinson's, depression, PTSD, autism, eating disorders, if you've consumed alcohol, tobacco, cocaine, MDMA, or cannabis, just to name a few. From your face.
All the above.
Yes, guilty as charged, and that'll be... perhaps you would like to buy some MDMA from our friends. You'll start seeing ads for whatever drug you were consuming. So that's an interesting development. And the point is that the cameras on these devices is hitting a very interesting tipping point that will afford these companies a lot more data. That's just something that you will not see reported, but it's just a really interesting insight. Yeah. Tweeting that out from the Tech News Twitter account, so you can see this new Samsung device with its new 50 megapixel camera hotness. And Facebook, similarly, is just announced plans for a smartwatch for next summer with 2 cameras and a heart rate monitor. And why would Facebook be coming out with a smartwatch with 2 cameras? Well, that's because Apple and Google are starting to block the data that Facebook was built on, that they used to get about you from your phone. And now Apple's like, game over, Mark Zuckerberg. Tim Cook is telling Mark to go fuck himself, and his company can go kiss its own ass and stick it where the sun don't shine. And Mark says, you know what? We got a plan B, y'all. We don't need your goddamn phone. We're going to make our own smartwatch and give it away for next to nothing. And people are going to love it. And they're going to put it on so that we can take all of that juicy, juicy data that we used to get from those phones that Apple's not going to share no more. Those meanies, they're taking their ball and they're going home. But Mark's got
Tyler, would love your thoughts on the Apple and Siri situation. I never
Yes,
heard of that before.
that's one of my next headlines. Yeah. So Facebook plans a smartwatch for next summer with 2 cameras, a heart rate monitor, and whatever any other sensors they can slap into that thing. Probably an alcohol monitor and a blood glucose monitor, which the Apple Watch is expected to have in the next series. And why do they keep adding more sensors into these devices? Because that's a lot of juicy data they can add into their ad networks to target you better for advertisements. And that's what the whole game is about, my friends. It's about your data. And that's why they want to make
And
this.
they say,
yeah.
And they say it's to connect. They want to connect it with the AR glasses that they're trying to build with the EssilorLuxottica.
And which is precisely why this thing has a heartbeat monitor built into it, because they want to know how you are emotionally responding to what you're seeing, because that is incredibly important contextual information. Of they can see what you're looking at, and they want to know how you feel about what you're looking at. It's about the data. It's about that juicy, super valuable Did you hear that sound?
Oh boy!
Here, do you know
What's
what
it
data
about,
sounds
Tyler?
like? Here's the sound of data.
Cha-ching.
That's the sound of data. So
What's it about?
look
What's
out
it
for
Some
about again?
context on this, Tyler.
yeah.
That sweet
This
juicy
is
data.
Nicholas from Sweden.
Hey, Nicholas.
So Boz commented on Twitter that the context to look at this watch is the wrist format, that they're already making this brain reading, mind reading armband. So the primary purpose to make an armband is to control AR with muscle movements and actually your neural intent that these armbands will be reading. And then secondarily, they'll make a watch out of it. But they're very much with a purpose to be paired with coming full AR glasses.
Yep. It's going to be super interesting. And this does, Nicholas, by the way, is a fantastic follow here on Clubhouse. He's one of the brilliant folks who is way neck deep into the VR space, along with Victoria, who is Victoria on stage at the moment? Maybe not. But Nicholas has been big into the VR space for many years, and it knows what all of the big players like Facebook is a real leader in VR. With the Oculus company, and Boz, as he's referring to, is the person who runs Oculus for Facebook and this watch as well. And that's not a coincidence that these two things are going to go together. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean
Tyler.
the Facebook Reality Labs
Yeah.
division is basically all their hardware, so the Portal camera as well, and there's speculation that that will also be used for VR AR to do like body tracking just by standing in front of the camera. It'll make like a 3D avatar into the virtual world.
Yeah, and I want to paint another important picture for people who have not had the pleasure of trying VR yet. And the future of VR is also a device that is like a watch. And why is very interesting, because when you're in VR, you don't have a mouse in your hands necessarily. Hopefully in the far future, you won't need a mouse at all. However, you will need your hands to engage with stuff in this virtual space. So you put on these goggles, you're in a virtual land, and when you raise your hands up to try and touch something, you want to see your hands. However, you won't, because you're wearing a goddamn visor over your face. So, but they will know where your hands are, your physical hands. If you raise your physical hand, you want to be able to see your virtual hand raised precisely where your physical hand is, and so that your brain doesn't get confused, right? You want to be able to have these virtual hands acting precisely as your physical hands are, even though you won't be able to see your physical hands. And this watch-like device can, if you put your thumb on your wrist, on the inside of your wrist, you can feel your tendons move when you touch your fingers together. And this watch can too. And this watch band can very accurately sense everything your fingers are doing as well, not just your hands, but your actual fingers. So if you point with your finger, with your physical hands, your virtual hands will also make a finger point. And if you click something with your finger or try and touch something with your finger or swipe something with your hands in VR or with your physical hands, you want it to do the same in VR. And that's why you're going to want a watch-like device like this anyways. But the fact that it'll trace your heart rate monitor makes it really interesting indeed, because when you're engaging with stuff in VR, your biofeedback is going to be incredibly additional valuable context as part of that experience.
Tyler,
No, go ahead.
I was just going to make a quick comment while we're on this. I also retweeted an article about Facebook basically confirming about AR glasses coming out and things like that. I retweeted it on the Tech News Around the World while we're on this topic. Figured I'd throw that in
Perfect. Yeah.
Who completes you, Amanda?
Uh-oh. I smell a harassment lawsuit.
Who completes you, Amanda?
I smell
Who's
a restraining
taking
order.
responsibility for Michael's actions?
A virtual restraining order is heading your way. So by the way, I believe that was Sarah. Who said that, by the way? The article. Amanda. It's the article that I'm trying to find to retweet. Is not only does Facebook have Oculus, in the past 2 days or so, they've also now we're getting reports that they're going to have their own AR glasses. And I wanted to ask Nicholas, now that you're here, have you heard about this, the Facebook AR glasses?
Oh yeah, they have confirmed that they're working on basically two glasses. So the Luxottica partnership is something that they've said will be coming out this year, and AR glasses, which is looking like form factor normal sunglasses, but can do all the magical things and overlay digital graphics everywhere, and make you have two parallel lives, one in the virtual digital twin of the world and one in the actual world, and the third in the fully virtual world. That will be coming in a few years. They've only said that they're a few years away from that.
It's going to be competing directly with Apple's, and it's going to be very interesting to see. Facebook has a very difficult road ahead of them, to be honest. I mean, yeah, the technology is awesome and it's really cool what they're doing over there, but they've lost a lot of a very big portion of the millennial generation, let alone Gen Z, and they've got a lot of work to do to gain both their trust and their interest back, if they want this to be able to truly compete against Apple's AR glasses, I think.
Let's not
Otherwise,
forget
they're going to
Snap,
sell
though,
them
right?
super cheap.
Gen Z is still on Instagram though.
Exactly.
Snap.
And that's the thing. It's like, I feel like it's going to be one of those things where, because think about it, that's the same way that they got a hold of the VR lead. I can't fucking stand Facebook, but I am an absolute head over heels in love with the man. I mean, the Quest 2. And I think that it's one of those things where if they make them cheap and if they make it something that it costs literally next to nothing comparatively, then they'll be able to grab market share because everybody's gonna hop on that boat. But if they try and charge something that is anywhere near um, and also we have to think about this too, because we know the price point for entry, barrier of entry for VR price point is $300 now. That's Facebook has set that with the Quest 2. We have no idea what that's going to be for AR glasses yet. Nobody really knows what a price point on that is going to be. So whoever does release it first is also kind of the test to see like what are people willing to pay in order to have more than a mild bypassing interest in AR glasses. What are people going to be willing to pay for that?
It's
It's
got to look
also
fly, man. It's got to be fly, right? You got to just elicit that, like, I need it response, and then price will matter.
But we're already good to paying good price for luxury classes. And the other point is about like what government will do with their credits, because sometimes you have like those glasses credit that you can have.
So
Mm,
one factor for the price is that the Oculus Quest 2 is already heavily subsidized.
Right.
right.
It would probably need to cost at least the double to justify their costs. But
Exactly.
of course, they're making it up with all the juicy data, and with the AR glasses, and with coming VR generations, they will have eye tracking, which will make the data that they mine from those
Juicier.
users are so much. They will be able to subsidize it down to nothing. It wouldn't surprise me
Facts.
if they
That's true.
can actually give away both their VR headsets and their AR glasses. You'll just be
Very
literally
true.
selling your soul to get them.
It's literally like, it really is like when we talk about if something's free, you're the product. At this point, I mean, you're literally the fucking product.
So there's a
So
yeah.
yeah, Facebook will be reading your face like a book, literally.
Tyler, just run down all the crap they can do about you. It's just so funny every time you do it. Like by looking at you.
Yeah, I'll retweet out the image so people know what I'm talking about. I'm going to speed read through a shit ton of articles real fast because there's more news than we can possibly cover today, and it's all very interesting stuff. And I'm going to be tweeting these out as I say them. And so Tanya, and these are articles that people sent in, and I'm just cherry picking the very best ones. So this first one's from Tanya, about an article about Google says its artificial intelligence is faster and better than humans at designing chips to build more artificial intelligence. So the AI can build itself better than we can. So thank you, humans, for playing. It's been fun. We're going to
Help with
build
us.
ourselves now. And that is a concerning development. That the AI can build itself better than we can. What are we doing here? So
And it took like 6 months to beat like 6 hours to beat couple of months from works of engineer to build those new TPU system. It's your work on the reinforcement learning.
It's starting.
Yep. Poppy found a really interesting one about geothermal volcanic Bitcoin mining. And there's now a search for geothermal volcanic energy sources. And there's a couple that I'm retweeting right now. Thanks to Poppy, you can see what these look like when they tap into this geothermal heat. It creates an incredible amount of energy.
Isn't that what the president of El Salvador said they were going to do?
I don't know about
Does
that.
anyone remember him saying that?
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Yeah, I just tweeted that out. That's been finally released by him officially in the press. He's doing it.
engineers can just build a home for the geothermal power.
Yep. And then Poppy, just like Faraz, found the article from Reuters about the French and Swiss central banks to trial digital currencies across borders. And then she also found an interesting one that I'm retweeting right now about after El Salvador, India may move to classify Bitcoin as an asset class because somebody named Nandan, who's the head of a very big company, says that India should classify Bitcoin as an asset class. And that's kind of sending some heat, into the crypto space. He's the head of Infosys in India. And Cheryl found an interesting one that I'm retweeting that says the G7, which is the 7 biggest economies of the planet. And then my Twitter decided to poop right as I started to read that article. So my apologies.
Infosys is just the largest IT company in India.
Okay. Carl just sent in a really interesting one. Another drone disaster. Tech. U.S. is serious about the threat they pose. Watch U.S. Air Force's Thor take down a swarm of drones in one go. And what this is in reference to, and you should definitely check this article out, is there's this new development within the drone space of the militarization of very cheap drones. And what do we mean? Well, it's been revealed by the FBI that drones were used in what's the neighboring country there next to Egypt there? Libya. That apparently somebody was killed with a drone. And there's been examples where somebody had strapped C4 explosives to a drone and then crashed the drone into people. And then there's what are called these deadly Black Hornet drones out of Norway that are the size of bumblebees, which may or may not be able to be laced with nerve agents that could then fly and poke somebody in the face.
Jeez.
And you can...
That sounds like Black Mirror right there.
Indeed it
that
does.
Black Mirror episode.
And you can imagine all of the bizarre dystopian use cases, especially for very underfunded developing countries who have neighbors they don't like Palestine, for example. So you can start to imagine how the Pakistan-India conflict could get very interesting with all of the regional neighbors around there and Burma and whoever else. I mean, it just gets wild because the cost of these drones is relatively nothing compared to even a single rocket. So it's this video or this website that Carl just shared about how the U.S. is starting to take this drone threat seriously. It shows the U.S. Air Force's system called Thor take down a swarm of drones all at once. So you got to go to the Twitter account and see that for yourself to see how that works.
But
and
just quickly, Natalia, the reason why it says another drone disabler tech is if you look in the comments on that, I posted another one to the Tech News Twitter where it's DARPA has developed their own drone interceptor that uses some form of silly string that it fires into the rotors of the target drone to then bring it down softly. So the first one you mentioned is this massive shipping container that's mostly used for defense at bases and whatnot, that uses like radio waves to overload the electronics in sort of an EMF sort of attack. And then this other one seems to be more in civilian areas where at the moment the only other thing that they use at the moment on the market is either nets or explosives, which obviously you don't necessarily want to use those around civilian areas. So two within 1 day of each other, one from DARPA, one from the Air Force, releasing their own sort of counter drone technologies. It's interesting timing.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is that as economical as the threat is in these low cost drones, the solution is silly string. So why overthink it? Going to defeat the swarm of killer drones with a can of silly string. That is
not just that. If you can bring it down more gently, then you can then run forensics on it to try and figure out, where it's from, where, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, tracking these and the usage of these and who's flying them in these populated areas or restricted areas is really important too.
Mm-hmm. So there's a huge bill being presented in the House, and Rhonda found this article that Democrats plan to take on big tech with 5 major antitrust bills aimed at the 5 big tech companies. Democrats plan to take on big tech with 5 major antitrust bills aimed at making it easier to weaken their monopolies. House Democrats plan to introduce these 5 bills. The bills will let regulators block mergers between rivals and unwind past ones, and bar some anti-competitive practices. The bills reflect recommendations from the House's landmark antitrust investigation, and House Democrats plan to introduce the 5 bills as early as this week that could dramatically rein in big tech companies' economic dominance, Politico reported Wednesday, and they claim they have seen the 5 bills that are aimed at reducing the power and ability for these big tech companies to even acquire smaller future competitors while they are still embryonic little startups that might be potentially big threats. And that is precisely what's been happening in China, by the way, which you can see in the video that Cheryl found and we retweeted about 2 hours ago, where basically every new tech company, when it's very, very small, receives funding from these big tech companies in exchange for sort of control to be able to bear hug them, as we call it, so that neutralize the potential future threats from any upcoming companies. And by the way, to be fair, to some extent, Mark Zuckerberg has done this in a much more fair kind of way of making incredibly generous offers to any social media app like Snapchat, which he tried to acquire when it was young, and he made them an incredibly generous offer, which they refused. But Instagram, he made an incredibly generous offer at the time of $1 billion, which everyone thought was insane, but now seems absolutely genius. And then WhatsApp was also has a social aspect, and he made a very, very generous offer to acquire WhatsApp. And again, seemed overly generous, and now seems like a genius investment. So I have to actually applaud Zuckerberg's approach at acquiring future competitors and making them part of the Facebook empire, although Snap didn't want to play ball, and apparently Clubhouse didn't either, because they no doubt they
You learn from
yes.
Yeah, you learn from Yahoo error and
Yes,
like Netscape error.
exactly right. Those who have been around the game for a while know that Facebook itself was offered $1 billion from Yahoo when it was very early, and most of the investors were telling Mark Zuckerberg, "You're insane not to take this." Very fortunate for Mark Zuckerberg, he had the voting rights at the end of the day to refuse the offer. Otherwise, he would have been forced to take it by his investors.
He actually also got an earlier offer from the Washington Post. The owner of the Washington Post suggested, I think it was about $300-something million, and he was taking it seriously till I think it was Sean Parker helped him raise that first big round with, I think it was with Peter Thiel.
Yes, it was.
And then Yahoo happened way afterwards.
Yes, and interestingly, Google tried to sell itself for a few $1 million in the very early days.
It was $1 million actually. And they tried to sell themselves to Yahoo. Yep. In fact, they kind of begged them for $1 million,
and nobody would take it.
Yep.
And next thing you know, they're running the show. And Faraz just shared a really interesting article that says, "Meet the world's first electric autonomous container ship," and you have to see this with your own beautiful eyes. It's a container ship that can ship tons of containers, yet it's fully electric and fully autonomous. And that is absolutely wild. It's a glimpse of the future. You can see it for yourself from the Tech News Twitter account at TNATW. And then our friend Hassan in the audience found Boz, who is the head of Facebook Oculus and AR glasses and this new watch that they will release. And he says, we've on Twitter, I've retweeted his tweet, which Hassan found, that says, "We've said we want AR glasses to be truly useful. We are investing in technologies across the board that will make the interaction feel more natural and intuitive. This includes research like EMGs, haptics, adaptive interfaces that could come together in a wrist based form factor, and that is awesome. It sounds like they are not aiming for second place. It looks like they really want to give Apple a run for its money, which will be incredibly difficult to do on the smartwatch front. Apple is just so incredibly dominant on the smartwatch, and Google and Samsung know that better than anybody. And if Google and Samsung together can't beat Apple, I wish Facebook the best of luck with that one. ByteDance, which is the owner of TikTok, launches Volcano Engine brand to offer TikTok some secret benefits here. And this is again being sent in by our friend Faraz, and I'm retweeting. And it says ByteDance launches what they call the Volcano Engine brand to offer TikTok secret to businesses. What are they talking about? I'm not really sure, but it says TikTok owner ByteDance launched the Volcano Engine brand on Thursday to offer its personalized recommendation algorithm to more corporate clients as the Chinese company seeks to expand beyond its mainstay consumer apps. So TikTok is getting into corporate, which is big business. ByteDance's recommendation system is considered the secret sauce in its success with apps like TikTok, TikTok's Chinese version of Douyin, and news aggregator Taotiao, and it was also one of the focal points when ByteDance was forced into talks to sell part of TikTok's U.S. operations last year following Donald Trump's executive order. And now I totally understand what this is about. Is they are exactly right that TikTok is one of the biggest, fastest growing trends on the planet, apps. And their secret sauce is their recommendation algorithm. They are masterful at finding the right next video for you to watch. Even Google and Apple and Facebook are stunned at TikTok's ability to find the perfect next video for you to watch. Similarly, Spotify is also renowned for their recommendation engine in recommending songs, just as TikTok is renowned for its ability to recommend good videos for you to watch. And so that is a very enhanced, mature, algorithmic asset that TikTok is now going to use for things outside of its TikTok app, because it's an asset they can take outside of the TikTok app and apply to other businesses. It'll be very interesting to see what businesses they apply it to. They've branded it Volcano Engine because it's going to explode, y'all. Get it? And they're going to help. They're going to help big.
Tyler, quick question there. Question there. The part that I don't get is ByteDance is the largest shareholder, right? Now, I know for a fact that ByteDance keeps its data in a secret cloud, which is untouchable by any agency on the planet. Okay. Now, if this is some sort of a premium service and ByteDance is involved, I imagine because this would be because it sounds to me like they're giving this data into ByteDance to keep into that secret cloud to get out of the situation that they've created across the European Union and the United Kingdom to also be able to protect businesses and keep their data safe. Am I reading this right?
You bring up an interesting point. This could be what is known in the biz as a Trojan horse, because not the virus type, but the business development type. And here's what I mean. ByteDance also has a big cloud business, right? And the way to get enterprise customers to use your cloud, if you have a unique service that is only unique to your cloud that they want to use to enhance their business, then they will join your cloud. And how do I know this? Because my startup, Microsoft had Microsoft Azure. My product worked with Microsoft Azure. Microsoft Azure loved my product so much that they sold my product to many large banks and many large telecoms like AT&T and T-Mobile, so that they would become customers of Microsoft Azure. So they use my product as a Trojan horse to get them excited to use Microsoft Azure. And so ByteDance might be using this new Volcano Engine functionality. By the way, Amazon Cloud has hundreds of functions and features that they are constantly adding to. And they do that because the more functions and features you have on your cloud, like built-in AI, for example, so you don't have to build all of your own AI stuff. It's just built into the cloud and you can plug it in as an API into your tools, as an example. So this new volcano engine recommendation algorithm, which is the secret sauce of TikTok. If I could use that as part of my app, but I need to use their cloud to do it, yeah, I might use their cloud to take advantage of TikTok's amazing world-class recommendation algorithm. And that would grow their cloud usage, and it would make me pay every month hundreds of dollars a month, thousands of dollars a month, in some cases tens of thousands of dollars a month, to use their cloud to get access to their recommendation API that is the secret sauce of TikTok. And so, yeah, it sounds like that's what they're doing.
Tyler, I just sent you an article. I think for ByteDance, they are using Alibaba Cloud within China, but outside China, they are changing to other cloud.
Yep. Makes sense. So thank you for that one, Faraz. Katerina found a really interesting article I'm sharing about blood test accurately detects over 50 types of cancers. And this one, we have to play this music right here.
Mulder and Scully on the case.
Blood test can detect over 50 types of cancer. I'll believe it when I see it. I pray to God.
It's like Theranos, but it actually works.
I pray to God it's real. Every time this has come up in the past, it's been utter bullshit and people go to jail. So let's hope it's real this time, because this would be an absolute game changer. And we'll just I tweeted it out. You can see it for yourself. Dig into it, share it with your friends, and let them know it's probably bullshit, but let's keep our fingers crossed. Like Cold Fusion, we might get there someday. Yeah?
Hey, Tyler, I got something for you on that. So we actually have someone on the platform here that actually, I'd see if I can ping him in the room here. He's a CTO of Pacific Biosciences. Okay. Basically does a lot of really cool things for creating some of the world's most advanced gene sequencers and stuff, for being able to like rapidly do assays and stuff like that. But the reason why it's interesting is that blood test they're doing, they'd be using his tech for that.
Cool.
What's really fun is I've had conversations with him about how far this tech can be pushed. And what I'm really excited about is when we have, like, we're already there. It's just a matter of tying all the components together. We're going to have these small modular devices that, like, you know, about the size of a cell phone that can basically do most of these, like, medical diagnostics, except it's not going to be something you go to a lab for. It's going to be something that's going to be, like, in people's homes. It's just a normal thing. Like, that's the future, again, in the near term. It's not going to be like some, you know, the treatment things and the diagnostics are going to be more software updates rather than having the physical devices, which is going to be nuts.
Indeed. And you better bet Google and Amazon are going to pay whatever those companies want to acquire them.
And everybody in the room, this is Chris from the MedTech side, Chris Jung. When they start talking about your medical data, remember that how they monetize, and they being the healthcare system, monetizes your medical data is by selling, if you have cancer, they're selling your cancer data to a plethora of companies that are studying cancer. So what I'm getting at is, let's capture this data back and sell it to these other entities directly. So when you have this device that'll tell you, hey, you have this rare condition, take that info and sell it to the highest bidder. Whoever comes up with a platform for that, is going to be a king. I'm done speaking.
Yeah.
And Tyler, can I share some news along the same
vein?
Sure.
Hi, Florina.
Hi.
Hey, Florina.
Hey. So for the first time, vascularized tissue was grown and kept alive and fully functional in a lab for over 30 days.
Whoa.
Huzzah!
And this was done through 2 winning teams from the Vascular Tissue Challenge that was done in partnership with NASA and the Methuselah Foundation. So this is essentially the first step into bioprinting or bioengineering whole organs from
synthetic organs,
patient stem cells. Yep, synthetic organs.
Wow.
But in the meantime, in the near term, this is great for pharmaceutical testing, for disease modeling, and organ bandages is what I've heard. So NASA live streamed it just yesterday. It was a really big deal. Yeah, I can tweet this out from my Twitter.
Please do. That's what we call a BFD, a big fucking deal.
tying with Farina stuff, there's some fascinating work being done with synthetic organs specifically for lungs. Now, they're like one of the things is like I was looking at like the things that can kill you. Like we can recover from a shocking amount of them for traumatic injuries from all sorts of things. There's two parts that we're not very good at recovering from. Your back's been crushed beyond belief, and your lungs went out. So now that was pre-COVID. So after COVID, all of a sudden everyone's becoming overnight experts on not overnight, but like reorienting the entire medical apparatus on how lungs work. One of the really exciting things of research that was done pre-COVID with stuff, but now it's gotten superpowers with things, is being able to actually 3D print lungs. And one of the really things about this, for anyone that's got like access to like a search engine with stuff, go and look up bird lungs sometime. It's one of the coolest things ever. Birds, when they breathe, they have this double breathing pattern. It has like double the oxygen exchange efficiency. It's shocking how good they are. Mammals evolved along different lines. We've got a different set of systems and things we're optimized with. But if you compare it against bird lungs, we already have working biological templates for, we know that pattern is more efficient, but we have different trade-offs we did for the mammal version. Now here's where it gets really cool and weird. When we start doing 3D printed lungs, there's the potential for us to make not just reach parity, which is challenging to hit, but looks like we're going to be able to do it. There's the potential to actually make better by basically creating weirder shapes and having 3D printed like substrates that all the cells populating and growing on, and they're getting some really impressive prototypes. The big problem is getting them to last long enough that they can actually survive for transplants and such. So if Farina is saying there with the having them survive beyond 30 days, that is a huge deal.
Yeah, and this is with liver tissue, so that's
okay, so that's a little bit easier, but still, awesome.
We'll be redesigning humans to optimize for space travel too.
Well, by the way,
redesign
these AIs
your system to consume lead.
These AIs are going to need bodies after all.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is
someone's got to
for
be in
space.
flesh.
I mean, what's wonderful about this is that it's both for space and for Earth. So, of course, ish hits the fan in space. What are you going to do? Especially with civilian, civilian missions, and there may not be a clinician there. So, yeah, digital surgery in space and all that stuff I'm really into. But yeah, Chris is absolutely right. And by the way, Chris, you need to be in this room like all the time. Just FYI.
All the time.
Here,
I was in a
Chris
conservative
Fornoff.
debating some prior things, and I was getting bored waiting my turn. So thanks for having me up.
You jump in
Yeah,
anytime.
Chris is a cool guy.
On this point of
him and I and his kids are going to get a beer sometime
while
soon.
we are on the topic of health, a couple of headlines that came out today. Google's health lead, the health boss for Google Health, says that the global impact is more important than revenue for now. Google's health vice president, David Feinberg, says he doesn't feel pressure to produce revenue, but instead to have a global impact. Feinberg.
That's the sound of antitrust in the background.
Yeah. They're coming for you, Feinberg.
Should we do a poll on that one? Like who actually believes that or not?
Feinberg, who's helped lead the company's health unit for more than 2 years, said he feels pressure. There's a typo in this CNBC article. He said he feels pressure product health products to Google-sized scales, meaning it could be used by millions of people. Feinberg said in order to bring its products to scale, it needs two things: partnerships and public trust, and a lack of antitrust regulation from the government, implied on the end, of course. The real pressure is this really going to help millions of people? Feinberg said to the Wall Street Journal's Health Tech virtual conference on Wednesday. Is it Google scale? That's the pressure to bring it.
Oh no! They're taking around simple words. When's the last time they just don't be evil with stuff? Right. They're saying is help people. It's I'm concerned when they start redefining words.
Indeed, that's exactly the case. And by Google scale, what he means is take over the whole goddamn planet. That's what he means by Google scale. For those who couldn't read between.
By the way, for people that want to have some fun with this, if you look at the submarine cable ownership things, half the cables are now owned by 4 companies? I think the tech
we covered that 7 hours ago in this room. Exactly.
Oh,
Google's laying a brand new cable from here to South America at the moment, and we talked about precisely how Google isn't exactly somebody you want to meddle with when they start controlling a decent share of the internet.
Exactly. Okay, now what's more interesting is what the regulations are for laying your own cable. Now that gets interesting because when you start seeing these government approvals saying, "Oh, you can only land in our country if you land on that beach right over there in that data center, which has some 5 eyes and 3-letter agency magic on there," but rather than that one. the people that make the decisions on where you're allowed to make a cable get really, really interesting, because a lot of people think of this as purely as a cost component. When you actually look at the nuance of how different countries have to negotiate with who gets a cable, who doesn't, who ends up staffing those technical committees, and if it's all staffed with some tech giants, yeah, we've got this new way of laying cable. Watch what happens. That's going to be where the power centers are in the
it's
very
not
near
only that,
future.
it's that Google's able to innovate on the bandwidth capable by these cables in a way that governments are just not able to do. And so more and more percentage of the internet is going to run through Google's pipes, not the pre-existing old school pipes. And then you fast forward 10 years in the future, and 95% of the internet's running on Google's owned infrastructure. And that's where now you know why Elon's doing Starlink in some sense. But
exactly,
the DHL makes a massive order of robots to keep pace with all of these e-commerce orders, and that's you ordering all of that crazy shit on Amazon, is forcing DHL to order tens of thousands of autonomous robots, which you can see a photo of these gorgeous little sexy robots. Don't get too excited, Michael. They're
They bite.
yeah. Yeah. You have to wait for the third date with these robots, Michael. So
I am Michael, and Amanda completes
yeah.
me.
Anyway, you can see these new DHL robots from the Twitter account. I just sent that out, and
I forgot what article it was. I don't know if it was a couple of weeks or a couple of months, but I remember I brought up this article in here where this science team was talking about the first person who's going to live to be 1,000 years old is alive today, right now.
yeah, that's
And is
the whole
from our
Invest
generation.
today.
longevity. Yeah, I mean, if that's Dr. David Sinclair spoke at my event right before COVID when he launched his book Lifespan. I was the first interview that got to interview him the day that his book launched, called Lifespan. And David Sinclair at Harvard is considered one of the top handful of people who are
Yeah.
focused on longevity. He was on Joe Rogan's podcast, I think twice now, and he has a cocktail regimen that he highly recommends, that he can't recommend officially, but his parents and his siblings take it, and he takes it himself now for a few years, and he's looking great, and his siblings are looking great. I'm taking it myself. I got to say, I'm looking goddamn great, if I do say so
Yes, you
myself.
are.
And
Yes.
Yes, you
yeah.
are.
Or at least when you
But
took
it's
that
just
photo.
interesting hearing all these different things like that Florina and them are bringing up, and just
Wait,
all these different things that reveal themselves. You know, every couple of weeks we hear more pieces of the puzzle that's leading to whoever this person is going to live to be
Well, Michael,
1,000.
here's the simple
Very
math: is
interesting.
if they continue to add 1 year of lifespan each year, then you can see how that plays out, right? So,
But we went
Right.
backwards. That's we went
Michael, do you
backwards
mind if I
recently.
interject?
yeah,
Isn't Walt
Sure.
Disney still alive?
I want to give a second recommendation for that book
okay.
Lifespan. I'm going to be working at one of the longevity labs at Yale this
Mm-hmm.
summer, and to prepare to work in the lab, they said read this book.
Oh,
So if you haven't read
hello.
Lifespan, please
Yeah,
read it.
he's the
Yeah.
foremost authority at
Absolutely.
the moment, because he's doing actual real research. And by the way, the research he's done in his lab is he has mice who have not only stopped aging, but have gone in reverse aging.
For how long?
Yep. So, Tyler, just FYI, David Sinclair is great, and he is doing some great work around metformin and
Yeah.
other molecules for extending healthy human life. But there's a lot of folks actually here on Clubhouse, like Aubrey de
Is
Grey,
Aubrey on Clubhouse?
Aubrey is on
Yeah.
Oh shit!
Clubhouse. David
Everyone's on Clubhouse.
David Goebel is on
Wow.
Clubhouse. So many of the longevity folks and
Tyler, you need to
who,
host a room.
Yeah.
yeah, we need a host room.
Yeah, I'll try and get David to join the room.
Um,
That'd be fantastic.
Yeah, it would be.
Yeah, I didn't know Aubrey was in Clubhouse. He's fun to listen to. And to me, Aubrey was been doing this for a very long time when it was like science fiction, and now he's kind of been vindicated in a way. Yeah.
Well, he co-founded Methuselah
Yeah.
Foundation with David Goebel.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the two of them together in the same room with David Sinclair, that would be a powerhouse room.
I know they're very familiar with
Okay.
each other, because I've mentioned it to. I asked David what his relationship is with Aubrey, and he's has a lot of respect for him and everything. Other really interesting articles.
This might be a trolley question,
Yeah.
Tyler. This might be a trolley
Okay.
question, but like, does Walt Disney still count as being alive, or the people who were
Oh
cryogenically
Jesus!
frozen?
I pinged Tom in.
It depends on if their brains resemble hamsters. I made the rounds on YouTube 2 weeks ago as microwaving hamsters to bring them back from cryogenics, and that was really fun to watch those YouTube videos because I got sent it from 8 different people in the time span of 3 days. So it's like, all right, but yeah, apparently, if there's a lot of work done in that space, and they just stopped doing work in it. So I mean,
yep. So
Those
I
guys
think
are
that's a
those guys are
philosophical
first gen
question.
though, aren't they?
yeah, it was an older one. It was actually from not Dyson. Sorry, it was one of the older scientist guys. I'll remember his name in just a moment with things. But they're doing some work with microwave cavities with things, and there's like, hey, we invented microwave radar stuff, so let's go ahead and try. That's one of the ecologist guys, if I remember right. No, anyways, but they're just. I'll look it up. Microwave hamsters.
Chris, let's talk offline. I did a lot of microwave resonance cavity stuff.
What were you about to say, Olivia?
Oh, I was saying I think that's more of a philosophical question as
Oh,
to
okay.
whether
True,
they're
fair
alive or
point.
not.
Yeah. And then when you
Also
talk
Ted
with
Williams.
And then when you talk with other longevity scientists, what their focus is on is healthy life,
yes,
not years of
right,
life, but
Right.
healthy life and quality of
yeah.
life. So that's why they call it healthy life
We're
extension
here for a good time,
versus
not
just
for a long
regular
time.
life
Yeah.
extension. Yep.
So, speaking of interesting med tech, our friend Cal here on stage found this BBC article. The title is "Miraculous Mosquito Hack Cuts Dengue by 77%," which is not of much interest to most people in the U.S., but when you live in Southeast Asia, as I and
Oh God.
a few others on stage do, Lakeisha very notably, it's of tremendous importance. If you live anywhere in Southeast Asia, dengue is quite a real thing. And this is incredibly good news for that part of these, Southeast Asia, amongst other places. So that's a great article.
Dengue almost killed me when I was 11. So this is
We're
like
glad it didn't.
huge news for me.
Yeah. Dengue, by the way, disproportionately affects children around that age. That's actually the worst age to get it. It's a really interesting virus where the older you get and the weaker your immune system gets, the less it affects you. It's very interesting. It affects you the most when your immune system is the strongest, which is around 11 years old, interestingly.
Yeah, last year in Bangladesh, they really,
Oh,
really
yeah.
were struggling because it was dengue season on top of COVID.
Yep.
And so not only were the hospitals maxed out because of COVID, but then children, one of my advisees actually lost his 4-year-old niece to dengue fever, but but yeah, it's real. It's
Yeah.
real.
Bangladesh barely even has hospitals, so I mean that stacks
Yep.
up.
Yeah, even in Singapore, last year dengue fever killed more people than coronavirus in Singapore.
Yep, just that's why I said that Southeast Asia. This headline is huge for people in this part of the world. It's not really that relevant in the West, thankfully.
Will this lead to more mosquitoes being released at TED conferences?
Yeah. Thank you, Bill Gates. Yeah, Bill Gates famously did one of the best TED Talks ever by releasing a jar of mosquitoes live into the audience, without and then calmed their fears by explaining why he was doing it. And they've basically genetically engineered mosquitoes in a very clever way to neutralize the bad mosquitoes.
It was one of those supervillain moments. It was. I wish we had more of those in the world. It was very beautiful.
Yeah. So Cheryl just shared, that's a tongue twister, a tweet call that the headline of which is China passes anti-sanction law. East Asian News, the China says the law will help it to retaliate against the punitive measures from Western governments, and what they're referring to was something that was just passed in the last 24 hours, which is in the U.S., where they passed a $250 billion kind of tech booster bill to help America battle China, essentially, for the future of tech. And China said this is unfair, and now China passes its own anti-sanction laws as a result. And you have to admire how quickly they respond to things. And again, thank you to Sarah for finding this Klarna article that we covered at the beginning of the hour. My buddy Sebastian, who I love endlessly, just raised a new monster round for their fintech called Klarna, where they just raised $639 million at a $45.6 billion valuation on the back of Northvolt's, the other Stockholm-based company yesterday that just raised $2.75 billion.
Where's Cal?
Where'd Cal go? Cal.
Probably partying.
No, I think he was on the phone just now.
Yeah,
He's
may
at
have
Best.
kicked him
He's at
off of
Best
the
Buy
app.
shopping.
He was on the phone just now, I think.
This man is in Best Buy playing video games.
He's not on stage now. Come on, he can't hear you.
Where'd you go,
Wake
Cal?
up, Tyler! Wake
He's
up! Wake up,
gone.
Tyler!
That's all right. He'll come back.
Yeah.
So
Ooh,
Biden,
Tyler, I have a little more.
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I have a little more Southeast Asian news. I'm not sure if you covered it in the last
Yep.
session. The Thailand with the opening sandboxes for certain travelers with vaccines
Yep.
from Europe,
Yes.
partnering with different airways.
Yes.
All right, okay, I
No,
don't
we
want to
didn't
rehash
cover it,
that.
but
All right,
I'm intimately familiar with it
Phuket.
because I'm here and I'm in the vacationing tourist part of the world, and every
yep.
hotel owner around here, it's all they talk about. So
Cal's
I'm
back.
overfilled with the information on this
Back from
article.
playing video games, brother.
Yeah. So the story is
Yeah, go ahead.
Thailand is going
Disappeared
to allow tourists to come back to the tourist areas, which are very notably Phuket is leading the charge on this because Phuket is an island. Phuket is very much dying. The entire island is about to go completely permanently out of business, and they are begging
Jeez.
the government for a solution to let tourists come immediately. And they came up with a solution, which is 70% of the locals need to get vaccinated, and then they will allow tourists to come back if the tourists themselves can show proof of vaccination and show proof that they are negative with COVID. Then they can enter as long as they stay for 14 days without leaving the island, and that's what they call the sandbox. Now, the other tourist islands like Koh Samui are saying, hey, we want in on that juicy fun and can't let us get in on that too. And they said, okay, you can do that too. So now everybody on the tourist islands of Koh Samui and Phuket and now Pattaya, which is not an island, is saying, hey, we want to do that too. So it's sort of the Phuket, now Samui, now Pattaya, which is not an island, trying to extend the concept, which will be a little challenging because the idea of Koh Samui is, yeah, you just let these people stay on the island. They can't really leave and hurt anybody. And that's why they call it a sandbox. And it is on track to start July 1st. So in just 20 days, they need to rush to get 70% of the locals on those islands vaccinated, which they have not done yet. They're supposed to start any day now, and they need to hustle double time to make that happen.
But you know
There's a
what's so
company actually
crazy
that came out.
is that each island, each province has its own
That's right.
policy. So the Phuket policy is exactly what you've stated. I read tonight that Koh Samui, you need a test and you only have to stay for 7 days and not the
That just
14 days as you
Lakeisha,
would.
they just
Mm,
changed that
Yeah.
about 5 hours ago. That they're now saying it's going to have to be 14.
Hot off the
Okay.
presses, you heard it here
Yeah, I
first.
mean it's just
so there's a company.
I
There's a company, Tyler, named Trade with an X. Their ticker symbol is Meds. I made some money off of them this morning, but their company announced the launch of its MedCheck's Health Passport app for iOS devices, which can be downloaded now. And basically, it's exactly what you just said. It allows you to digitally confirm that you have been vaccinated as you're traveling through countries. And so it's interesting you just brought that up.
You
I
know,
think
post World War II, the Germans were basically saying, hey, this passport system sucks. Can we basically slowly dismantle this? And everyone's like, yeah, that sounds great. Let's make a lot more of them. I'm kind of wondering, it's like, if this trend keeps continuing, I'm kind of wondering, like, what the passport of, like, 200 years from the future from now is going to be like. It's like, okay, you need to have your vaccine things and your gene profile and these other things. It's like, I get it for COVID. I get it. I'm a
It's going to be
supporter of
like
this.
multipass from Fifth Element, which is basically
Exactly.
what
But
that's basically what Apple's doing right now with the Apple Wallet. I mean, right now you're going to be able to have your house keys, your car keys, your passport. They're working on your passport right now. They're
well,
teamed up with the TSA so that you can get through
uh,
TSA with your Apple Wallet, and your driver's license even is going to be able to be on there in a couple of months here. So yeah,
look,
we're
I've got
working
a
on the
problem that everyone's
multipass.
on graph theory stuff with like all the social networks and everything else, but they're also using it for like the idea graph for like Google and everything. So there's tracing the infection with like oh look like these infections and everything. Too many of them read Dawkins with stuff, so it's going to be like this thought meme plague thing. It's going to be okay. Wait, this person they used the wrong words on spell correct. We can't let that idea into the population. Don't let them onto the island. It's a beautiful island where people have good thinking ideas. I'm realizing that essentially the passports right now they're just basically a freedom of movement idea. But what's fascinating is when they start to become containers of something a lot more than that. Like if you look at essentially like whether you're vaccinated or not as a medical thing, but as an information carrier, that's going to get really interesting because like your immune system basically says, I see that piece of viral information, I'm going to respond to it. In the near future, when we have this synthesis technology that allows us to take information and do like on the fly, like, you know, gene printing, protein printing, etc., we will be able to like print medicines just on the fly, vaccines, also bioweapons, which is going to be a whole craziness. When this technology exists, there's going to be this strange synthesis of information biology that's going to not really exist in our current form, but it's going to be more this form that's going to affect whether or not people groups are going to interact with each other, not based around the biology, but around the information around them. It's going to get really funky here soon.
Yes, exactly right. I've been warning folks, but I'm glad that you're validating my point. Yeah.
I just want to quickly circle back to the Thailand / Southeast Asia tourism thing. The Philippines opened in October for local travelers because like we're an archipelago. So island to island, traveling for people who were vaccinated or got tested negative and then quarantined for 14 days. So I'll keep you updated when we open up internationally again. We have been talking about it.
Thank you.
Tyler, Spain is opening up in June for those who are vaccinated.
Yeah, and Portugal's been open the whole time, and that's probably why Spain is watching that very closely. Rhonda sent in an hour ago, the Tribeca Film Festival 2021 is building a hybrid playground of tech-enabled art, which will be a very fun kind of way for people with VR headsets to test out attending a virtual film festival. Yeah.
Tyler, just a quick one, JP
Hey,
here.
JP.
Just before you move, hi guys, thank you for bringing me up. I was just gonna share the point about Spain you mentioned. So Spain doesn't allow people that have the Sputnik vaccine.
Okay.
So it's just something that caught my attention because let's say some South American countries only have the Sputnik. So I just wonder if it becomes a bit of a way to exclude certain countries from entering certain countries.
Fair enough.
Just a thought.
Yeah, great point. Additional point there. Thank you for that. And there's a few more. Speaking of vaccines and things, Germany starts rolling out their digital EU vaccination pass. Coming in from Cheryl, and I'm retweeting that now, so you can read all about Germany today. Started rolling out what they call their digital vaccination pass that can be used across Europe as the continent gets ready to reopen. And
there's no way this can possibly get misused.
Germany of all places, it's a little yellow star that you wear on your shirt. It says that you're good. It's all
they
good,
might actually have like just the fact that they actually might give a crap about actually like at least doing some basic thoughts on how this could be misused. Like there's other countries. Okay, it's a little bit too easy to signal out things, but I'm just going to bring out a specific implementation because it wasn't the entire country. It's a specific city and a specific place with things. In China, when they had. To get on the subway, you flash your cell phone that says whether or not you're green, yellow, or red. So yeah.
Yep. Here's another one from Rhonda. Self-driving technology company Argo AI plans IPO within a year, and there's a photo of the car, in this case a Ford, so you can start to get a look at these. And shares of Argo AI, which is backed by Ford and Volkswagen Group, could be listed on the stock exchange this year. Or before the end of 2022. And it shows a car driving down what appears to be a road in Palo Alto, if I'm not mistaken, which is maybe not a coincidence. But get a look at this. There's actually two really interesting things happening with all of this self-driving technology. One is the idea of retrofitting old cars. This one does not appear to be that, but from what I understand, Argo is one of the teams behind that, where you can basically take not any, but a lot of modern cars and retroactively add a autonomous driving system to that car.
Will they have enough semiconductors to build them?
Yeah, that's a great question, honestly. And there's a lot of bills that are being passed as we speak to try and accommodate that in the U.S. specifically. But the car companies have said that, by the way, Tesla is raising their prices on that point, among other resources that they're constrained on, like the battery minerals and things. But then there was a car company in China who said we have to actually slow down production almost to a halt due to the lack of semiconductors needed. And car companies themselves are now removing parts of the cars that are dependent on these things, like your smart rear view mirror, where you have a camera in the back that allows you to do that. And here's the interesting part of this.
Is there some like
That's
have
some
Mavana.
weird
we
echo,
Yeah,
Tyler.
Mavana, can you mute,
Yeah,
mate? Because
Mabwana,
it's
got to mute.
feeding Tyler back.
So I'll mute him. So there we go. So a lot of the semiconductors in the car, as you can imagine, are not the actual combustion engine. It's not run on a chip. It's a lot of the
Although the fuel stuff
a
is
lot of the
mixed
a
fuel.
lot of the fuel stuff is,
Inner
yes.
inner carburetors and fluidics again. I'm sorry to self plug.
Yep. But they are trying to redesign the cars to minimize their dependency on these semiconductors, in light of the point that is becoming a real bottleneck and constraint to getting these cars, off the factory floors.
Can you imagine those old engineers that were basically like, that just, hand fabricated grease monkeys, and they go and you join the automotive companies in Detroit or whatever, and they're saying, man, we can put these metallic strips and have this nice little analog thing and like tinker around. And it's like, wow, that's great. Hey, let's throw that away with these new computer chips. This would be great. It's like, no, if you do that, it'll be more complicated and you might want this thing. It's like, no, we don't need that anymore. It's like there's outsource the jobs elsewhere.
Yeah.
And then it's like, wait, guys, the future is the past.
Yes.
We're going back.
Well,
Have we talked about?
I just want to touch on an interesting personal point, because my father was a professional auto mechanic from the very young age until he died, and I lived in his shop where he built a business of dozens of mechanics that did specifically Porsche, Mercedes, BMW, and Audi. And as I grew up from the age of 2 in the garage, and I could tell the sound of any Porsche, Mercedes, BMW, Audi by sound, like most children can recognize dinosaurs by sight. I could tell you the year, make, and model of any Porsche by the sound of the engine by the time I was 4. Ooh. So how the cars have developed over time, he used to talk, every dinner conversation we had for decades was how the cars were themselves being digitized and chips were being put into the cars, and how the cars, as he would say, are becoming computers and less of a car and more of a computer. And certainly the Teslas really epitomize that point. Some might even say Teslas aren't cars at all. In fact, Tesla doesn't think of them as cars. They think of them as a sort of computer on wheels with cameras, to that point.
They're brands.
Have we talked about Prometheus fuels at all in this
Not
room,
today.
Tyler? Okay. It's not a
before
headline,
we move
but
on,
yeah,
I just wanted also sort of on a personal note, I think it is so important to try and go back to some of the technologies that you're able to interact with a bit hands-on. And I think of this in terms of the younger generation, right? Because I think maybe the 90s kids were the last kids who were able to take apart anything that they had and take a look at how it worked.
Yeah, refrigerators are a great example.
Nowadays,
a lot of
kids can't look at any of that. They have no way of knowing how things work without going through 20 years of school first. And it's
one laptop
really
per
a
child had a
problem
button on
in
the
terms of
keyboard. You could see
education.
the code running in real time on anything on the computer. Why the hell hasn't them standardized on everything?
Yeah.
It's by design, folks. And again, I'll get off my soapbox, but I'm part of this crowd, right? Like Chris knows me personally because we knew each other in March of 2020. But my team and I have built a ventilator that has no moving parts. It's based off of 60s technology that we've revolutionized, and that's the reason why we're successful. Is I asked my team, like, do we think the reason we're successful is we're this unique group where we grew up with an analog childhood, but a digital teenagerhood or a digital adolescence? And everyone in the room raised their hand and said yes, because we still get that things work for a reason and not because it's a piece of code. And the new engineers are so reliant on new technology that when that technology breaks, like a supply chain to make ventilators, chips to make cars, they don't know how to go back to basics. So Tyler, I'm so moved when you told me the story about your father. I started screaming in the house because it's like that's like what built this 90s-ish generation, and maybe we're the last like dinosaurs left, or we're the last people left to help save us from becoming dinosaurs. I'll get off my soapbox.
No, but what it leads into is the really important conversation of the right to repair stuff, because the stuff is getting to a point where Apple doesn't want you to repair it, and because they're quite confident you'll screw it up. They don't want anyone to repair it, and it's even gotten so far that they say that iPhone that you bought isn't in fact actually yours, it's theirs. and only they have the right to repair it because it's theirs. It's not even yours. You don't even have a say in the matter of who gets to repair it because it's not yours. So you got to read the.
Can we start over?
Yeah.
Like, can we start over from semiconductors and go on up kind of thing? Like, I'm very serious. When you look at like all right, I'll do the 30-second version. The most complicated computers in the world are all running AI stuff. The thing is, all those AI things are just 12 math functions run on a single ALU and a sea of memory. The CUDA cores, all the other stuff, if you strip out the GPU crap, it's literally just 10,000 little cores all right next to each other. It's a simple math function. Designing a chip for that simple. There are people in this room that have the skills to do this. The wafer fabs, we've been running the supply chain on this. The wafer fabs are basically all built around, it's like, okay, there's Intel has got its whole thing, and it's all based around, like, applied materials, and applied materials is all based around, like, Zeiss stuff. If you actually go straight back to the original things, going, wait, what instead of going all this manufacturing in these multi-tens of billion-dollar facilities, they fooled everyone to thinking that you have to build them that big? What if you do this nice little full wafer, like a Cerebus type kind of design? Cerebus design with like a full wafer, but it's only like 2 or 3 inches wide. It's just the same copy and paste pattern across the entire thing. You put a very simple firmware thing so it doesn't turn all on and break it. Put as much cooling on that sucker as possible, and just start over. Like, we don't need the existing tech chain. We can start over again and then make it where we don't have to put up with all this shit that we've gotten used to.
Or we can look at this next headline with a whole new lens. Get ready for this. You can see I just tweeted it.
Here it comes,
folks. This $2,700 robot dog will carry a single bottle of water for you. Who needs a tote bag when you can have a little robot dog butler? And it shows a man. It's a YouTube video of a guy jogging with his new little robot dog with a bottle of water strapped to his back. So, when you get tired, you can pull over and have a little sip of the water that your robot dog can hand, strapped to the back. So it says Boston Dynamics isn't the only company that makes futuristic quadruped robots. Chinese firm Unitree Robotics has also been at it for years, and this week revealed its latest creation called the Unitree Go 1, a robust-looking four-legged bot that's remarkably cheap, with prices starting at just $2,700 compared to the Boston Dynamics robot dog called Spot for $74,000. What is the Go 1 for, though? Well, a demo video shows it being put to such useful tasks as following someone on a run and carrying a single bottle of water while you run. Sure, it's not practical to have a robot butler for your phone or your wallet, but it makes a statement on a night out. More realistically, the robots industry is still exploring the best applications for these sorts of machines. Spot, for example, is currently being tested in areas like industrial inspections and police reconnaissance with mixed results, as they say, because we covered that headline in how the NYPD is already sending back their robot dogs because the citizens of New York said, hell no. And Unitree, though, says it wants to make quadrupedal robots as affordable and as popular as smartphones and drones. So a fun demo reel that shows the Go 1 just sort of chilling out and looking cool makes perfect sense. And you can watch the YouTube video if you check out our Twitter account. It's the most recent tweet of the robot dog. But
the video is amazing. I said. We need robot dogs for everyone.
This video is amazing.
The thing that really hits me directly is that to weaponize this, just strap a mine to it and say, go look for a tank.
That seemed a lot more expensive than 2 wheels.
Pulling out the dog of the trunk. It's crazy.
How long is this room going to go for today?
We have 2 events that dovetail at the end of this event, which start in 30 minutes. So you've got the AI news and also the Facebook, Amazon, Google, Netflix, Apple job referral, interview tips, and Ask Me Anything session with team members from those big tech companies are going to help you with all of your questions about potentially getting a job there. Okay. Both of those start in 30 minutes.
Just
choice.
If we have
provide
time,
choice now.
If we have time, I just wanted to throw some thoughts at you guys for 2-3 minutes about Clubhouse and Twitter Spaces and get some thoughts out from the room as to where this is going.
Hold on one second.
If you guys have time,
you guys really have to watch this video of this robot dog. It shows it.
It's amazing.
It's really amazing. The dog client is standing on top of a high stack of boxes about
and do the flip.
And it does a goddamn backflip from about 3-4 meters up. It does a backflip off the top. Oh, think of it as jumping off the top of your house, doing a backflip onto the lawn.
And then the guy
What's the
you
brand again?
pull out the dog from the trunk.
Yes.
It's really really
What's the name of
awkward.
the dog
The
again?
dog is called the Go1. Go1.
Same one as the one that is rejected from New York.
No, the one from New York
Boston
was
Dynamics.
Boston
Boston
Dynamics.
Dynamics Spot.
Yep. Ah,
This
so this is a lot cheaper, right?
this one is $2,700. The Boston Dynamics dog is $74,000.
So is Boston Dynamics going to be segued like what happened to Segway?
Well, they're different.
They already got bought out by Hyundai. Was
Hyundai.
things
Well,
they're doing like
it was Google and then SoftBank and then Google and then Hyundai. Yep.
Eventually realized Boston Dynamics is a really good robotics dance video company. They're very
Yeah,
good at this. When you actually want to do it production, it's a little more nuanced.
Their marketing videos are the best in the biz. But Geoff, if you're in the room from Germany, one of his personal friends is the head of strategy for Boston Dynamics, and he introduced us over email, and he apparently is open to the idea of coming into tech news around the world as the head of strategy for Boston Dynamics. And
is this before or after his yacht ride? After he goes shopping in Dubai.
One of the interesting elements of Boston Dynamics is apparently the acquirers, and part of the reason that SoftBank, which is a Japanese company, as you probably know, bought it and then quickly sold it, was because it turns out that Boston Dynamics does a lot of stuff for the U.S. government, and the U.S. government wasn't all that happy about a Japanese company buying it.
Well, not just a Japanese company, a Saudis-funded Japanese company, which is increasingly having ties with China.
Well, but formerly,
this stuff gets fancy.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Formerly, the MBS fund, as we call it, the Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund. Although
before the Khashoggi,
precisely after post Khashoggi, Masayoshi-san from SoftBank is a little too smart to take that Khashoggi money. So it's
there's a little more interesting that I've read some geopolitics, and that's interesting that after one of the big things that they were going to do before the Khashoggi stuff was they're going to make this huge deal about having all the tech companies go in for essentially for the Vision Fund, and they're going to have this whole not Vision Fund for IFF or whatever. But then when there's some weird things that happen behind the scenes that basically, like, apparently America was complicit in some of that. It got weird. But the short version about that is none of the tech people ended up going to that conference and help the Iraq help move Saudi off of oil.
Just a point there, guys. The media reported it as if none of those individuals showed up. However, the truth of the fact is, gotta trust me on this one, brother.
I know who was there. The Davos in the desert.
The truth of the fact is, even all the CEOs from all the major banks in the world that said that they weren't going, they all showed up and had private meetings, not at the public event, but outside.
Poof.
Here's the interesting thing, though, is that event was shaping up to become one of the most important events on the planet, right as that was happening. And it was a really unfortunate timing, because that event was on track to become the new World Economic Forum plus more, with tech, with more smart people, and with Gates, with Massa, everyone there in the front row. And it could have become the most important event on the planet if not for the Khashoggi thing, the public event I'm referring to for us. And then, of course, the NEOM futuristic line city there up in the northern west corner there of Saudi Arabia on the borders with Israel and Egypt and whatnot. That whole project essentially of investors got gun shy as a result of the Khashoggi thing as well. So there's definitely been some casualties as a result of it all.
Rumor is Qatar spent $50 million on PR for that whole thing with stuff. So I mean, like, the thing that bothers me is that if we actually cared about human rights, if we actually cared about actual journalists and other things like that, we would have a very different posture. But that specific incident was blown so far that it forced everyone to take very strong positions that aren't necessarily where they would have otherwise. So it's fascinating to watch how that shifts to everyone.
So a few more headlines to jump into here. One from Faraz from Financial Times about the UK now, England, which is no longer part of the EU, remember. The EU is trying to crack down on Amazon's use of data, and now the headline is UK is also plans to probe Amazon's use of data. And that relates to the conversation we had 6-7 hours ago about how all of these big companies, Amazon, Facebook, Google, are essentially data companies. And the way that the EU handles these things is to do a deep dive on how they're using all of this data exactly, and finding them when they misuse the data, which these companies could give a fuck about paying these fines for the misuse of this data, because this data is so incredibly valuable to them that $100 million fine is well worth their time, and it hardly is a speed bump at all in the value of that data. So, sue us again, and we'll see you next year. And feel free to double the fine next time, because it's like you're wasting our time by holding these court cases. Just send us the goddamn bill, and we'll pay it. So
they want more, though. They don't want to be just data companies. I don't know if you guys talked about the new Facebook product that they announced, the Smartwatch, yet. I assume you do if you've been running those.
Is it this one for
that many
kids?
hours.
No.
Is this the one they're aiming for
No,
kids?
No,
That's
no,
another.
no.
No, that's the next one.
Yeah.
The point is, are these people stupid? Are these governments stupid? I mean, how do they keep suing when they know the lawsuits are not going to make any goddamn sense?
Well, I mean, it's doing what it's supposed to do. Nothing's supposed to fundamentally change about the power structures that exist. So, in many ways, it's like you have to put enough to show that you're doing something.
Yeah, but just to address Olivia's question, yes, Olivia, about an hour ago, we talked about the Facebook new smartwatch with 2 cameras and a microphone. And the question, of course, is why 2 cameras? And the answer very simply is because the device ultimately is about data and collecting data from the users. And why? Well, because Apple's hardware, Facebook doesn't have a phone. And Apple and Google have phones, and they use those phones and the hardware on those phones and they obviously are able to collect lots and lots of juicy data from those phones, which they used to share with Facebook, but no longer are going to. And that's why Facebook needs its own hardware. And it's much, much cheaper to make a smart watch that can collect all of the data of where you're going, what you're doing, and how your heart rate is responding to what you're doing and what you're seeing. Than to make a phone that no one's going to buy, because Facebook did try to make a phone, by the way, in 2010.
It's like their 8th time doing hardware with stuff. I think they've had to go through they've shut down 3. They started and shut down 3 hardware labs.
Is working.
Yeah. Kind of. It's bleeding them dry as far as the investments are concerned, but it's working on a tech basis that people are actually using it. So there's that.
Yeah. And I think that they can afford, to lose money on something that'll give them a foothold. I think that the watch is yes, ultimately about data, but I don't think it's the watch that they want data from. I think they want it for their reality glasses.
We covered that as well. Nicholas on stage.
I'll just be quiet.
No. You're exactly right.
No.
You're most welcome, and you are. It's comforting.
You're spot on.
No,
you're spot
on, Olivia.
Just keep going.
We had a friend from Stockholm who's a real expert on the topics of VR and AR. There's nothing in the field that he's not up to speed on, because he's at one of the leading companies himself. And he confirmed that and showed the receipts, in fact, that the whole point, one of the key points behind the watch, is to be used as the virtual hand virtualization control for the VR and AR system. Because, by the way, they just announced a new AR glasses.
Oh, I know what's going on. So I used to be at Leap Motion with stuff. We did gesture hand detection things. The problem they're running into, I know exactly the problem that they're solving with that. So one of the biggest problems is you can have very accurate hand tracking while it's within vision range. But the problem is localizing it. They've got essentially the ones you wear essentially that read nerve impulses with things. That's pretty good for a bastardized high level version. You need visual for the other parts, but when it's non-field of view at all, you need one more sensor to basically ground those measurements, and you only need a magnet. It's not even that much. So that would be perfect for essentially for getting people to say, "Oh yeah, I'm just wearing this as a thing."
Right. Yep, it's super cool, and it's a very smart move on their part. Pending, there's also the Trojan horse effects. They might be able to get some percentage of people to just use it anyway. Here's another interesting headline that will dovetail in some sense into this conversation we're having right now around big tech. There's the big tech companies in the U.S. at the moment are now, as we've been talking in this room every day for the past few weeks, going headstrong into health. Google Health, that we covered just a little bit ago, where the Google Health lead guy very conveniently is downplaying, and trying to avoid being regulated. And then you have Amazon going strong into health, and Walmart is the other big player going big into health and making interesting acquisitions, as Walmart announced today. Amazon as well, testing out all kinds of interesting stuff with telehealth. And now in India, in one of India's most and biggest conglomerate companies, which owns many, many arms, including the biggest car manufacturer in that part of the world, called Tata Digital.
Tyler, the only one covering insurance is Amazon, right?
I don't know which ones are actually dealing with the insurance at this point. So
Oracle was doing some stuff. They're not typically included in the tech news
No,
thing because they like being back.
Amazon for 1 year, I believe Amazon, and I'll check this out. I believe Amazon for 1 year is giving free insurance, but I'll check this
find
out.
it. Yeah, there is something to do with Amazon Prime and possibly health insurance. See if you can find the article in the headline. So Tata in India is the big player in India. So Tata Digital, the subsidiary of Tata Sons, said on Thursday, that's today, it is acquiring a majority stake in digital health startup called 1mg, like 1 milligram. Quite a clever name for a medtech company, I should say. And the latest in a series of investments as the salt to steel Indian conglomerate enters digital consumer space in medtech. The firms didn't share the financial details of the deal, but a person familiar with the matter says that 1mg has received over $220 million in primary and secondary investments, and valuing the company at about $500 million. Tata Digital has acquired about 55% stake in the startup. And does anyone know anything about this company 1mg in India?
I think someone had a VC that needed a favor paid off.
Yes. Well, also 1mg has raised previously from the Bill and Gates Melinda Foundation and Sequoia Capital India.
There you go.
Yeah. Well, ta-ta for now.
Wait, hold on. Sequoia's LP table leaked recently with things. Didn't they have hold on, I need to go check something.
I didn't hear about that.
Sorry, I missed that. Tyler, did you say 1mg just raised a round?
No.
Prashant's my roommate.
Tata Digital's buying 55%.
Ah, excellent. I'll ping my friend Prashant. Maybe we can invite him over.
At a valuation,
well, he's my roommate.
At a valuation of about $500 million.
Awesome. Yeah. That's good news.
Yep. That is, but it speaks to the fact that the big data companies are getting into health in a very big way, because that's where the juicy opportunities are. Because
got a question. Health data. Yeah. Is it still possible to like if I want to get services of a healer somewhere in the world? Is it possible to do so without having all of my personal data raped by a tech company somewhere? Is it even possible to opt out anymore?
No, because it's all about the data at the end of the day, and that was sort of the main point.
That sweet juicy data.
And this is
right. But what if I'm about to die? What if I don't want to be in the thing? Isn't there a whole medical ethics thing?
No,
that's the last entry.
Until and
no, Tom. Yeah, ethics. No.
If you want to be born in the Google hospital, you have to sign over your data before you come out of the womb. That's the new deal. So,
ethics and data aren't really friends.
Well, my point is that the reason, just to unpack it for the slow people at home, the slow kids in the class, like our friend Dave, the reason that Google and
now you can pick on Chris.
Yeah,
you should pick on me next. I need more of that.
The reason that Google and Amazon is going into med is because they are data companies. They know how to use data very effectively to their advantage and use sensors and all of these new gadgets to collect unimaginable amounts of data that you have no idea they are able to collect. And they leverage that, and they go into new areas that are encumbered and entrenched by slow-moving dinosaurs and Titanics that don't know how to use data, and that puts the medical industry square in their crosshairs, because that is a huge trillion-dollar industry that is run by old dinosaurs that are due for disruption and don't know.
Hey, I have an assertion. They're no longer data companies. I think they're becoming sovereigns at this point. When you cover this number of essentially all the things that a city-state or a nation-state government provides for its citizens, or competes, or has territory, or makes laws or regulations that affect the day-to-day lives, I think at this point we should just say it's not that they want to basically disrupt the government or other things. That's less popular with the insurrection thing. It's let's disrupt government. Oh, maybe not that way. That was guys, that was an algorithmic thing.
Right.
At this point,
Chris,
I think we should.
We've been talking about
this, Chris. Chris, the real question that we want to know is which company will El Salvador sell itself to first, Google or Facebook or Amazon?
Yeah,
they've already sold to the blockchain.
Yeah, but I mean, how long will it be before Google or Amazon actually offers El Salvador a nice check?
I was in the room with essentially when some Teal Foundation people were doing some fun. Well, not Foundation, they're the other side, but they were getting back to some very interesting meetings in South America with stuff. So I'm just like, it's weird watching this stuff play out 10 years later. I'm like, oh, they actually went and did it.
The Google it will it, and by the way, will it be called Google
Special economic zones are where it's
will
at.
it be called Google Land or Googistan?
Toronto.
Well, they tried and they got pushed out. They just bought a huge chunk of San Jose, by the way, to build a whole new urban city, they're calling it, which is going to be a mix of 4,000 residences that Google will control.
Users.
Yes. No, their own employees, by the way, are now going to live in their own Google town, which is down. They're going to redo downtown San Jose. They just, it all got approved. By the way, this was 4 days ago. Everyone in the room will remember on stage. And correct me if I'm wrong, but apparently the city council members who approved this were moved to actual tears. It was reported at the voting of this.
Good tears or bad tears?
I don't know if the data from those tears can be used in some way to figure out, or the algorithm could do the facial detection to figure out really what those city council members were feeling as they sold that downtown San Jose to Google. But Google is converting downtown San Jose, which is a real fixer-up of a project, by the way, into
into San Jose gone. You're not going to be able to go there.
By the way, this room is not sponsored by the city of San Jose, but
sign up next for essentially the Google recruitment sessions.
Yeah, but Google is going to rebuild downtown San Jose into Google Town,
its own image,
G Town. They're going to call it G Town, baby. And there's going to be
no. What's funny is they're doing this at the same time. This has been in the works for over a decade. They basically put billions of dollars for architects and everything else like that. And like, okay, guys, now we're going to make the ultimate office park. We'll be king of corporations. It's going to be great. And all their workers are saying, we don't want to go in the office. We enjoyed lockdown. Let's just
but that's
never
the
go
point.
Back to the office.
Now they're blurring the lines between the corporate campus and the city ultimately because they're one and the same.
Well, I mean, it's the bikes. It was all about the bikes. They basically have those colorful little bikes, and they let everyone take them all.
It's more than that.
It was the way of establishing territory.
No. It's much more than that
area.
because the campus. The whole point of the campus was to design it so that you never needed to cook at home. They had better chefs for free at the campus than you could ever cook for yourself at home. So everyone at home
I was so disappointed when I walked through that campus with things, and I'm like, okay, so here's the tourist things in the center. Where are all those buildings? Oh, that's office cubicle land. That's office cubicle land. That's office cubicle land. I'm like, oh wait, no, magical. I thought this was a paradise as far as the eye could see.
Yeah, but you should. I have seen the new designs that they've hired the best Danish designer who's quite renowned in Denmark to do big parts of the new project. There's a new Google campus being built, by the way, near Shoreline Amphitheater, and then there's the downtown San Jose project, which I've seen the renderings for. It actually looks very cool. The point is, it will be a privately owned, corporate owned city essentially.
Do they have throne rooms?
It has 4,000 residences for their team members, but the interesting thing is now your company owns your residence, and so the question will be, are they essentially going to offer very reduced rents in exchange for the data they can collect from you inside of your box,
from your soul?
Yes, on the toilet, on your smart toilet.
Now, the question is, will they have their own helipads? Because they're all about having that airport right there. Is that just for the executives? Maybe they can have like a few hopping between the buildings.
But Chris, you're going to love this because your smart toilet will share data with your Google medical lab downstairs, and your gym data and your grocery store data.
Of course,
it's all going to be shared.
Who wouldn't want to do this? Are you some sort of deviant that doesn't want to share your data with the database?
The point is this is the future that Google needs to test now, because they realize 20 years in the future, when in these futuristic cities, they need to understand what the opportunities are now for how to combine this juicy technology data in very interesting ways, so they have a 10-year head start on any future competitor.
bringing back to Walt Disney, he basically had the whole thing of like, brain in a jar type factor of like, does he live on with stuff? I'd argue the ideas have lived on. The Epcot Center basically being the planned city, going back to the Garden City initiatives, like back in like, turn of the century of like saying, what should the ideal city look like? The original version for Epcot was actually much more ambitious. It was like the idea was a celebration, like the whole, they literally bought this city from the state. It was like this weird, it's still incorporated with this weird legal structure.
Yes.
But one of the things that's interesting about that is they had this thing where they would basically have people go into people's houses. This is the original plan. I don't know exactly. It didn't exactly turn out the original plan, but the original plan was to go inside people's houses and they swap out all of the gadgets inside people's houses while they were away, just doing whatever their thing is during the day. And you have people continuously, basically upgrading your day-to-day life with physically upgrades with everything. And I just, whenever I get like turn on my iPad and it's like, hey, your iOS has been updated. I'm like, it's like I just imagine like the invisible Disney gremlin like going in and like taking a whack at all the software in the back end, because the physical version of that is a lot more embodied of what's actually occurring. But what I'm wondering is like, would people consent to having that happen if they could physically see what was going on with their data?
Right. Well, this is the interesting bit. And it's funny you mentioned Disneyland, because the project that I was doing with the large conglomerates inside of Stockholm, we have the meatpacking district, which locally in Stockholm is called Slakthusområdet, which every Swede here knows. And if Johan's still on stage, he can corroborate this entire story. Oh, Nicholas is still on stage. He knows this project very well that I was leading in Stockholm. So I was leading the smart city project for redoing the meatpacking district because the city brought me in to build the startup ecosystem, which I've done for the past 8 years. And now that mission's accomplished, the new focus is to convert the meatpacking district, Slakthusområdet, into the world's most futuristic smart city, because it happens to be identical in geography to a Disneyland in terms of size, and it has a perimeter border and a big front gate that says in huge letters, "Welcome to Slakthusområdet," just like Disneyland. So your point of Disneyland is very well taken. We were going to convert this pre-packaged sandbox area, which is about 4 blocks by 8 blocks, so 32 square blocks, into the world's most futuristic city. We were having meetings there every month with all the biggest tech companies from all over the region, and everything was going swimmingly until one of the biggest property developers of the Nordics came in and, due to the excitement of everybody at the table, decided to buy the whole thing in one fell swoop, just as COVID was launching. And so now that project is on hold until we get back to Stockholm and see where the chips fall.
You almost got to be the Termin of Silicon Valley, but for Stockholm. The Termin, like Stanford, like designed the whole Silicon Valley.
But I'll tell you, you would have loved being in those meetings, because the essence of those meetings was what is the world's most futuristic city? Because the people at the table were Amazon, Uber, Google, Facebook, on and on and on. And it was, what are all of our, we started off very slowly by asking, what is your version? What is your futuristic version of the smart city? And what we came to realize is we need to invite the best supermarket company in the Nordics and bring them in to imagine their best futuristic supermarket. And how would that fit in with the best gym company, and what does their futuristic version of a gym look like? And how do the data between those two overlap? And what does that look like when you share it with your doctor who has the best lab in the city? And just making the very best showcases of the best retail experiences and VR and drone deliveries and robots and chips in your hands to open everything, and on and on and on, and a database and an app that every citizen would have that gave them control of the permissions of all of those data sources and sets. So it became a really cool project that unfortunately got put on hold due to COVID and the purchase of the geography by one of the big, by what's called AL, Atrium Loonsbury came in and bought the whole thing. But they still want to do the project. They just want to own all the buildings.
One of the things here that you're 30 years too late. Already in 1991, 1990, we were doing techno thing there, but that was rave, and that was hot at that time.
The raves in Slakthusområdet, you mean?
Yeah,
I got a little taste of that myself. Yeah, at night the meatpacking district does have a one hell of a nightclub. Yeah,
Tyler, something to look at too with things like, there's been some really interesting works for like omni sensors that basically can selectively infer context, where they'll be like, basically the idea is you take all the audio, all the visual, all the infrared or whatever, and then instead of sending essentially the raw data elsewhere, you do just enough processing locally to say, okay, I think the person is turning on the sink or something, or wait, this person is basically cooking food. The high level versions like that. Some of those guys went on to Apple with other stuff, but the reason I'm bringing it up, there's these old like the like graffiti labs where they had like little LED throwies where the idea is you just basically throw this like little device. It doesn't make more than flash an LED or whatever. Some fun art projects, some fun community involvement, art, vandalism, just the whole who's deciding what tech goes somewhere. What I'm seeing in the future is these small little sensors that basically have some LoRa radios, last for a couple of years or whatever, but rather than having them installed as a part of some citywide rollout as, a lot of approvals and everything else, what's going to start happening is people just take a handful of this stuff with little magnets on the side and they just start throwing them onto everything nearby. And then essentially the whole sensor net is something that essentially is established after the fact. And then it's going to be a matter of who has which sensor grids that are going to fight with each other for EM space. It's going to be a fascinating future.
Very cool. A quick couple headlines before we hand it over to our friends who are going to do 2 different deep dive rooms here starting in 2 minutes. One is from our friend JT that I just retweeted about Apple's head-mounted electronic system, quote unquote, includes directional haptic output using AirPods and AR/VR headset to direct a user's attention towards a position. So essentially you'll feel a little tick-tock on your left temple or on your right temple to tell you to turn your head to focus on different things. That's quite an interesting patent. And then our friend Carl just shared a really interesting article that I'm retweeting to our Tech News Twitter account at TNATW, which you can see by clicking onto the title of this room, where you can follow the Tech News Club, which you should do, but only if you want to be beautiful and wealthy and successful. If you don't want those things, then please do not follow the Tech News Club because you trust me, it's not all it's being beautiful and successful and wealthy is not all it's cracked up to be. So please only follow.
It's really not.
Please don't.
If I may, more money, more problems.
Okay, so then in that case, feel free to click on the title of the room and follow the Tech News Club.
Olivia is P. Diddy's goddaughter.
How did you know?
It's obvious.
So Carl just shared this article about utterly brilliant Welsh farm hooves, tons of manure to send Ethereum to the moon. It's a BBC article about using manure to generate energy. It's quite a laugh. And then there's an Oculus Quest headline as a departure gift for you. The Oculus.
Wait, was that the same headline or those are
separate ones? The other one was the Apple patent about the haptic feedback to control your attention.
No. The manure, is that tied with the Oculus?
No, it's totally separate. The Oculus Quest Guardian system is getting a size increase. The Oculus Quest update will increase the Guardian play space by 50%, giving you 15 meter by 15 meter to explore virtual worlds. And I just realized that Ben also shared this article, so thank you to Ben and to
the prison has expanded.
Yes. The prison has expanded, Chris says.
Very big deal. It's funny because I remember when I first got my Quest 2s, I remember taking them to the park to just see exactly how far I could create that bounding box. And it was a decent size, but I kept wanting I wanted it to be bigger, just to cover an entire floor space. And so when I found out about that, I was pretty excited. They've got some really interesting things that they've been talking about for the Quest 3 and 4 that I'm genuinely starting to get pretty fucking excited. I think they're going to be, and Facebook's working on their own silicon now too. So we'll see what happens.
Indeed.
30 seconds story time on the VR bounding box.
Yeah. So that
Chris, go ahead.
I've been dominating. I need to step aside anyway. Sorry.
That brings us to the end of another Tech News Around the World. Thank you to everyone for joining us, and we will see you next time. Do join us in the Thursday AI News, or we will see you over at the Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, Google virtual job